The wait has come to an end. iRacers are back at Speedway, Indiana. Yesterday, Robert Malechka won the 14th running of the iRacing Indy 500. Today we'll find out, will it be a 4 different driver in 4 different attempts to win the iRacing Fixed 500. Delighted you join us here on RaceSpotTV on the iRacing Esports Network. Our Junior Kanky Party joined alongside by Justin Prince and JP. You and I, we've commentated on our fair share of Fixed IndyCar racing. It's fair to say, though, when it comes to the Speedway, mastering the challenge of front and rear anti-roll bars, the weight jacker, and getting the most from the in-car tools, crucial to coming out on top.
Especially today when it comes to a fixed race like this, and when it comes to the 500-mile race on the virtual side, you have to make sure everything is down to a T. One of the major talking points when talking things throughout the day today with drivers, expecting a very pointy and sharp setup. In other words, you better be ready on those tools if you want to win this race here today.
And what a race we've had in the past. Only once has this race finished under caution. Sage Karam back in 2021 by quite a margin, but Phil Kraus winning under that caution. Casey Kerwin coming out on top when we last went racing, and he'll be here ready to defend his crown, representing, of course, Spire Motorsports. How did they make the field? Well, JP, 4-lap average qualifying runs, and we were talking just before we went live. The margins razor thin to make the fast 33.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to that difference between 33rd, 34th place alone was 1/1000th of a second. Just to get in the top 40, those drivers, several of them tied within about 3 to 4 1/1000th of a second of a time ban. It was razor-thin margins just to be able to qualify your way into this field. Everyone is on point. The problem's going to be, can you stay on point when it comes to race conditions? That's the critical part here today.
And we saw that in the Open 500 yesterday. Conditions warmed up as the day went on, and so that meant drivers had to very much adjust in car as well. What a special event schedule. So glad to have the iRacing Indy 500 back in it, but month of June is going to see us make our way to upstate New York for the 3rd of our VCO Grand Slams, where 2 spots in the IMSA Esports Global Championship will be on the line before a very busy month of July sees the Brickyard 400, Spa 24, Martinsville MX 500. I mean, take your pick, JP. That's a treat to pick amongst in the special event calendar.
A busy calendar especially, and going to be interested to see what happens in July, because you have the Brickyard 400 with its return to the Oval. You also have the Spa 24. That's going to be a major one for several different teams. And also, how about some X5s at Martinsville for the first time? Thanks certain Twitch content creators for that respective side. I think people are going to be pumped up by July and throughout the rest of the year with how this busy schedule looks to stack up.
Personally, I can't wait for the MX 500, and I'm still wondering exactly how we're going to try and figure out the broadcast of that. It's just going to be shouting, I feel like, for most of it, so we're going to need to rotate our broadcasters, make sure that the voices get rested. This, though, drivers on track for warm-up, and so many strong names out there, but I think some names that will very much catch the eye. Plenty of drivers giving us a look behind the scenes as well. Look at that wall. Robert Malechka so busy celebrating down in the bottom right that he's forgotten to flip himself around, but those drivers are locked in and ready to go, JP.
And I was talking actually with Robert Malechka III just a couple moments ago before we went live. He mentioned that it could be difficult to try and become one of the first drivers, in fact, the first to try and win both the Open and the Fixed 500 in the same year. Especially you're talking about different setups. You're talking about different philosophies, different aero balance potentially based on set fixed setup here today. He's going to have to work very hard, especially since he's pointing upwards towards the sky, to make sure he gets himself pointed upright by the end. He told me straightforward. He plans to try test the limits before making moves, but you have to beat this man right here, the defending winner from 2022.
And he won in style as well, beating, Alexander Van der Sant, Robert Malechka as well. We saw Jose Soria up there in the field in years past as well, so watch for him to potentially work his way on forward. Casey got that trophy in the background, definitely going to be one to watch. But we've got Team Redline and Gustavo Ariel going to be joining the fight. We'll have Diogo Pinto, the Porsche Esports Super Cup champion from a couple of years ago, in the mix as well. But then you've got let's be honest, some of the oval specialists, those representing Nexus Esports. There's Dominic Lukomsky, of course, winner of Prodigy Passing, going to be part of the Prodigy Draft coming up later on this summer. But, just a handful of the drivers that we'll have to watch out for here today, JP.
Yeah, in fact, you have grand total about 3 NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series drivers in the field. Dylan Aldermansel's in the field as well. You also throw in the mix for today's race Nate Stewart for the first time making this run. Several drivers with those regards. Talking with Nate, trying to get experience for this evening. Others trying to get a feel of the ovals in general. It's going to be an interesting time today.
A couple of the drivers are in the Zoom but elected to turn off their webcam, so we tried to take a look at them and we couldn't. There's Daniel Ferguson, WSR Esports driver who's just made it into the field. Williams Esports have a couple of drivers as well. There's Alessandro Bico. But the one thing that we know here at Indy is it's steeped in its traditions. And if you don't know what Indy means, well, we've got a couple of things here at RaceSpot that we always do. It's time to queue up back home again in Indiana. It's so good to be back here at the Speedway.
Back home again in Indiana, and it seems that I can see the gleaming candlelight still burning bright through the sycamores for me. The new moon it's fragrant through the fields I used to roam. When I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, how I long for my Indiana home.
The dulcet tones of Jim Neighbors ring out across the Speedway. It's great to be back home again. Next up, before we go down trackside, it's time for the playing of the American National Anthem. Moments away from going racing. Delighted you're joining us here for the fourth running of the iRacing Fixed 500. Our junior Kanki party alongside of Justin Prince and JP. 200 laps, 500 miles. We often talk about the Speedway picking its winner. You've got to make sure you're there at the end if you want to be in with a chance of coming out on top.
It's not just about getting just the speed right, especially when it comes to the fixed side. It's about getting the strategy to a T correct. Picking the right choices when it comes to moves, being smart with said moves, having the car control, and better yet, survival to be there at the very end. If you want to survive 500 miles here at the Sistine Brickyard, you have to be able to get every little detail right. And for a lot of these drivers, the preparation's been weeks on end to make sure they're ready for today. Can they get it right once it's on the line? That's, I think, we're about to really see here today, and pretty much so for many of these drivers. If you don't have the prep down, it's going to be a busy time. If you do have the prep down, it's time to prove that you can handle the pressure when it comes to racing all throughout today.
Any predictions from you, JP, before we go racing? These drivers are about to be yoinked from the track and be sent down to get gridded up before we go racing.
In terms of predictions, I'm expecting it to be an interesting one on strat, but won't be surprised to see someone from the mid-pack like Kerwin get the strategy right. But also, I like the odds of Malechka III. He's got momentum coming in.
Yeah, but you know, some of these drivers are going to be tired. This is the final opportunity to drink the milk. The iRacing Fixed 500 moments away from getting underway. Let's take you down trackside to see how they'll line up for the 500 miles that stack up ahead. It's Hamilton Akabuizi, fourth in the open qualifying, but fastest here in the fixed qualifying that will lead us to the green. He represents Team i5G. He'll be alongside Phil Kraus for the private label Team Hype, trying to be the first repeat winner here in the fixed 500. Michael Romanidis, Coanda Esports' own, is alongside Peter Berryman for the Apex Racing team, with Rodrigo Franzoni, BK Racing, and Robert Malechka fresh off the victory yesterday alongside on row 3. Alessandro Bico for Williams Esports alongside of Luke McEwen, with Lucas Prada and Adriano Pinheiro, the Brazilian, rounding out the top 10 with Brandon Trost, and then Sander Nijhoff 11th and 12th positions. Remember, no 3 wide, instead it's 2x2 as you find Dylan Alt alongside of Gustavo Ariel. Two very, very different worlds, but two very, very quick drivers. Jason Brophy, Chris Van Den Ness for the private label Team Hype, and the Megiars Team Friday Sport Machines. Brendan Lichtenberg then is alongside of Casey Kerwin, defending race winner. Some work to do from back in the pack. Vasilius Belliciotis and then Jose Soria 19th and 20th. Soria's had a podium in this race before. What can he do from back in the pack? Zeke Willis, Jaden Munoz, Dominic Lukomsky, and then Pablo Espez, the rest of the top 24. Nate Stewart, Aaron Vasquez, Diogo Pinto, Beckham Jasir, Luke Peters, Jere Lehtinen, and then the final 3 drivers, Daniel Ferguson, Lucas Linkvist, and Brendan Clow, round out the 33 drivers with a chance to come out on top. 33 strong names, 33 names from around the iRacing universe. JP, they lock horns here in this iRacing special event.
And it's going to be interesting what the approaches will be for a lot of these drivers. Talking with those towards the back, it's obviously wait until you have the opportunity to then be aggressive later. Others, you have the track position. Why not try and set the tone early? So I think it's going to be one of those races where you have to feel it out. You can't just quite simply go pedal to the metal. We've seen a lot of aero push over the years, especially in the most recent year when it comes to this car and this racetrack in the opening corners. You have to be right and you have to be smart if you want to win this race. Survival is key.
And so again, 2x2 on this initial start. It will be single file for all subsequent restarts. Cool track conditions to start with. It says 49 degrees Celsius, and you may think, well, that's rather warm, around 120 Fahrenheit. This is going to be a pack race initially. We'll see 2 and 3 wide, and the fuel window, JP, 29 to 35 laps. We went almost 180 laps green flag running yesterday.
It's all going to come down quite simply to how this start goes, though, on the strat.
Here we go. Pace car off and away and ready to go for the greatest spectacle in sim racing. Hamilton Akabuizi gets us racing for 200 laps here at the Speedway. Already high speeds for the drivers, and there goes Michael Romanidis to the inside of Hamilton Akabuizi. He'll take the point into turn 3, but JP behind. You can see the 3 wise drivers going high and trying to make moves in the early stages.
Yeah, a lot of bold moves. Remember, a couple of years ago, seeing drivers use that third groove especially to try and find some clean air. Starting to see many of those drivers search for that already to avoid burning up their front tires in the midst of the Euro Watch, especially in the heart of this field.
Brandon Trost looking around the outside of Lucas Prada in that bright pink machine. He slides his way forward to 9th. Remember, outside relatively unperturbed from dirty air, at least early in this race, as drivers very much hugging the low line. And you'll see some bold moves around the outside as drivers stunned to foot it the long way around. Single file for the time being, though, back to turn 3.
As they continue to work it around here, some of those like Trost trying to just get the track position, already up 3 spots. Others trying to prevent the slide back right now. You have Biko, for example, a -2 already with how things have gone on. In the heart of this field, everybody just trying to settle in. Looks like many of the others starting to almost get into fuel-safe position in the midst down the straightaways at least.
I tell you what, Brandon Trost is probably up on that weight jacker right now and really dialed in on the tools. Franzoni in response in that BK Racing car goes up high and tries to now work on the back of Luke McEwen. Already we have 2 laps complete. Running down towards the north end of the track once again with Michael Romanidis leading. Haven't seen so much swapping at the front as much as we would have expected, much like we saw yesterday across of the opening 180-odd laps.
Yeah, again, it's quite simple. Drivers, when talking about things with drivers like Peter Berryman earlier today, said quite simply, passing is going to be difficult. It's going to be important. Moves at the start with the temperature cooler, the best opportunities under green, but better yet, it's about being there towards the end. And right now, remember, Berryman was amongst those who was down in the 20s by the end of yesterday's open race. Going to hope for a lot of a bit different finish here when it comes to his case.
Yeah, both he and Luke McEwen got tangled up together. No fault of one another, if we're being honest. But wow, we got trouble back down through the field. Dominik Lukomski, Jari Lehtinen, albeit with no yellow flag out just yet. This is a race that has not traditionally seen too many cautions, and it'll stay like that. Back to the yard of bricks we will rumble, but with 2 drivers now sitting in pit lane.
Yeah, a rough moment at the back of the field, it looked like right there. And already, that is not what many drivers want to see here. Attrition from the start, having cautions where it's a guessing game on what strat is the best strat. Remember, if it goes green, could get interesting on top-off strats later on. But up at the front here, still seeing Hamilton Acombolisi just playing the patience game. He's really built up that experience. One of the youngest drivers in the field. He wanted to race open wheel racing since being on the platform, has developed that skill, especially in the past 2 years.
And now since joining Team i5G, getting very, very comfortable with, how this Indy car works. Was quick yesterday, a technical issue, really what deprived him of a chance of fighting towards the end. Still fighting a little bit further back in the pack, single file at the very top of the field. Brandon Trost the one making some moves, and there is maybe the root of some of the issues. Dominik Lukomski on the outside, bit of a technical dropout for him, and Jari Lehtinen gets collected into the wall for the both.
He had the same issues a couple weeks ago in the NASCAR competition, some tech issues when trying to race in the pack. That seen some problems. At least a big break from the inside group, but at that point, Lukomski just too quick on the exit, slammed the wall, nowhere to go for the inside car, and already 2 out, Lehtinen just nowhere to go.
We ride with Daniel Ferguson, the WSR Esports team manager. Oh, one of his counterparts just in front, Lucas Lindqvist, that would have been, had a very, very scary moment there as he tried to get out of the way, but survived. And now with 6 laps complete, early stages still of this race, these drivers run their way once again to the north end. Acombolisi saving that fuel. Remember, we can use fuel maps in this car, and maybe that's where Brandon Trost is just carving his way forward, almost with ease around the outside now of Peter Berryman, and forward into 4th.
It's definitely looking like someone's saying, you know what, I'm just going to go straight to 31 or 33 laps into the stint. I want track position and want it right now to be able to contend. A lot of these others with plenty of the experience we've seen are just amongst those, just letting him do so, just letting him burn up his stuff. But in the heart of the field here, you're talking about Ariel right now currently in 11th. One of those in the red line camp currently just, again, keeping it solid through the gears, keeping around 6th gear in the heart of the pack here, right behind Pinheiro.
And a couple of Brazilians fighting through here. You're such a big culture of IndyCar racing in the country. TK, one of the national heroes, of course, and Gustavo has so many memories of watching TK race, and got to be racing for the Tony Kanaan Esports team a couple of years ago before he linked up with Team Redline and the crew with Max Verstappen earlier this year. There's plenty of fuel saving going on there as he releases some of that pressure, running off towards turn 1. Where if you watch this most recent running of the Indianapolis 500, the 108th running a weekend ago, you saw that in the cool conditions that they had, so much of the trouble was down at turn 1. And often that becomes of where the wind is going. But JP, you can see as it's playing right now, not much wind to speak of.
Yeah, I can tell you this when calling races in the league scene here at this racetrack in the past couple weeks. It's quite simple. Lots of aero wash. If anybody gets tight there, they're likely to slam into that wall in the short chute, and that's where a lot of cautions ended up potentially happening there. So you have to be ready on the throttle for the car in front of you to take you up that extra quarter car length, push you up towards the edge of the wall, because if you slam it here, that likely is end of your day, suspension damage, meatball flag, if you carry too much speed in the midst of the draft.
Alessandro Pico, race winner in the Porsche Esports Super Cup. One of a handful of drivers probably in the field and looking to the future, and the IndyCar iRacing Butt Kicker Pro Series that lurks not far away. Get some experience in this machine at a track where we sometimes talk about it being one of the not easier tracks, but better tracks for a road course racer to try and translate their skill set to open wheel oval racing. It drives a lot like a road course, and even though each of the four corners has their unique things, especially some of the bumps, for example, through turn 2, it's very much four corners that are somewhat alike. What do you think about that, JP? Are there any other ovals that are maybe easy for a road course racer to try and pick up?
I would argue that this track's not easy to pick up on an oval regardless, because even though it's somewhat four different, or rather two same set looking in terms of physicality, it doesn't drive that way into the brickyard, because you have to take a different approach to turn 2 compared to, say, turn 3, compared to turn 4, compared to turn 1, and where you can put the tires, especially with the bumps. In terms of others that you pick up and easily do well, obviously the super speedways come to mind on the ovals, but obviously that comes to mind where you also need a set mindset of race knowledge. You need good expertise. You need to be able to know when the right moves are made. So in other words, it's kind of a mix where even the easy ones are hard.
Yeah, and you know, super speedways, the racecraft's so difficult, right? How do you deal with dirty air? It's not always as simple as it seems, right? So I'm always intrigued where the translation and transition comes from. Pablo Espez in the Wave Italy machine, the number 18, has Jaden Muniz, the Texan representing Williams Esports behind, and then Sander Nyhoff. They've all been passed by Jason Brophy. Espez, another one that's on the charge as well. He's plus 10 so far today. But it's still very, very early in this race, so I don't think anyone is going to be too concerned. And again, remember, fixed setup. There's not much they can do in terms of changing the car's, aero balance. What they can do, though, those weight jackers, the ARBs slightly influence how the car responds to their inputs.
Yeah, let's keep it up with how things have been discussed in terms of the IndyCar community. That's been a big talking point in terms of building things. What do you use on the weight jacker? Try to make sure the compare notes to be able to get that balance just right. You get the raw numbers, even on that for preferred balance. It can cost you long run because it would hurt your tires compared to someone who's able to run a bit more of a looser car, and in turn, been able to drive better later on once the traffic really bundles things up, like, well, about here, or when it starts really coming into play when the track temperatures expect to skyrocket like some expect here, where it starts to separate out. You need to get that discussion point down amongst your team to get that in union to figure out what do you do in X situation. And that's where a lot of the top teams have been big on speed in preparation coming in.
We did see, right, teams being important yesterday in the Open 500. I think it will be a similar thing when we get to the end here. If you have strength in numbers, you'll very much take advantage of that. Lucas Prada's not just got a drink to his right-hand side in case he gets a little bit parched during the race ahead. He's gone and made his bed as well. So 10 out of 10 for a sim racer. As behind him, Jason Brophy tries to challenge and work his way on forward. Now, Brandon Trost has passed Phil Kraus, who has built a house in 4th position for the time being and sat exactly where he is saving his fuel. Here comes the charge from the 21. Akabu Easy rides behind Romanidis, and Trost now within a car length of and a half goes up high, searching for some clean air on the nose.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how the movement's been going for him so far. Wouldn't be surprised again on the fuel mapping. He's actually one of the longer...
Sander Nyhoff down low, and is that going to be a caution, or will we stay green?
Don't see the flag yet here. Nyhoff having a big slide there. Might have been with Soria there. Wouldn't be surprised. So the Dutchman getting involved from 16th after a loose moment.
Oh, wow, that was a close one. And again, it just seems as though they're doing enough to get out of the way in time to avoid the pace car coming out. That car's already loose and sideways, and that was definitely the Drago Racing car of Jose Soria, and then contact into the inside wall.
Soria looks to be okay with the nose, just barely has a tiny scrape on it. Soria right there, just had to get out of the gas to avoid significant contact. Lucky move for Soria.
Word in chat is that Brendan Clough is also of Nexus Esports, so they've got plenty of drivers in contention, although now with both Sander Nyhoff and Dominic Lukomsky watching on from the sidelines, we streak our way back across the yard of bricks inside of the pagoda, inside of race control and the PA booth in the building there, and all the VIPs as well. But still, Michael Romanidis, after starting down in third, has been controlling the tempo up front.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, to plan. Those two seem to be working together quite simply, just having Romanidis burn up a little bit more fuel up front, allow Capolizzi to lift, stay in the line of work here. Trost is the one that would be the one outlier in this grouping, though, because, well, we've seen him pass out inside, outside, everywhere in this grouping. He is a former champion when it comes to the Fixed Series side as far back as 2013 on the platform. Ewan, meanwhile, he seems to be trying to find a way to close up at least back to Berryman to keep the teammates close there.
Yeah, they have started steadily, and I think that's all they're trying to do. All they were trying to do yesterday before they found themselves caught out through no fault of each other's and tangling with one another, but that's the way Indy goes sometimes. It picks its winner and it picks its losers. Losers being the multiple, winner being in singular. Are we going to be 3 wide behind? Yes, we are. I think was Aaron Vasquez in the Drago Racing number 12. Vasilis Belitsiotis, the Greek driver in that 24 Williams Esports machine, just sits behind and rides. We still got one long queue, though. It is after the 3 retirements, 30 cars in contention.
Still very early in this race, though. That's the critical thing. So you have to make sure you're pretty set on the pit strategy coming up. We're already less than 10 minutes away technically from that if you count it by minutes. And some of these drivers, like we're seeing for the Williams Esports entry on board with, starting to get a little bit impatient almost, saying, you're holding up, Aaron. I want to go, but I also don't want to dive it inside and risk contact. Can I please go? Aaron saying, once again, no from the high side.
And this is where, you know, one thing that is quite unique, I guess, about virtual versus real racing is understanding all those little differences. And one of the important ones is the fact that marbles, you know, that in the real world, it's such a big factor. And you saw that, you know, when they didn't sweep the track during one of our restarts in the 108th running. A car went up high and unfortunately found itself caught out. Now, marbles do exist on iRacing, but maybe with just a little less of an impact. And so, you know, Christopher Demerit to great success, often pioneered running up high to the point that we called it the Demerit line. We'll see if we find any driver migrate up to effectively almost running the wall. Not quite Ross Chastain-esque, but on that verge. However, 21 laps about to be complete. Romanidis leading. Remember, we talked about fuel numbers at the start of the race. JP, if this race does go caution-free, knock on wood, unlikely as that is, the drivers at the front may only do 28 laps. Drivers further back, saving fuel, could do 35 laps and cut out an entire pit stop.
And I think that's why a lot of those are not panicking in this choo-choo train. And better yet, why Capolizzi's not just saying, can I take this point and make the pass? It's better for him to just stay behind the machine in front, save, save, save. It's going to be very much so difficult later on to try and get the spot, obviously. Capolizzi said himself to me before this race that he expected it to be a strong line to defend when you're up top side. Well, we've already seen the mid-pack. But right now, the strat is just think pit stop, plan out your strategy, and almost work the race backwards to make sure you cut out that pit stop.
And you have to start by thinking about cutting out the pit stop. You can't go to it at the end of the stint and go, ooh, let me start saving some fuel. No, it doesn't work that way, and so very much have to keep that in mind. Great to see how many of these drivers, again, are giving us their webcams, and so, you know, we can take a look at both Dylan Alt and Jaden Munoz as they fight for what is 14th and 15th positions, directly behind Lucas Prada and Gustavo Ariel. 2 more drivers giving us their webcams as well, so Lovely to be able to take a look at some of the reactions behind the scenes, and I'm just hoping that we get a bit more of a reaction if one of our winners is on camera than we did yesterday, where, not sure if you saw it, Justin, but Rob Malechka crosses the line, wins the iRacing Indy 500, and almost looks as though he has just done another race. Doesn't even look like he's won.
Well, 3 wide.
Well, 3 wide, yes.
Thousandths of a second. Well, it was a busy time for him yesterday. I'll give him credit to that. But as well, it takes a lot of preciseness to get a win on the open side, let alone the fixed side. It takes just getting everything right. And for Robert Malechka III, I think for him it was one of those, does he do something like that? We know he was great in the league scene, especially in the past couple years. That's where he really spiked around 2022. But able to win the big event in its return back for 2024, it's kind of a huge thing, obviously, for him. But better yet, for all of those from the Powerslide group in that regard, for him to break through. Obviously, his approach today is quite simple. Just feel it out and remain patient for later. He said it's going to be extremely difficult to try and do what he did yesterday. Especially,
yeah, given that he won the race, had to drive over to Chicago, which was about a 3-hour drive, stayed the night. So I don't think he ended up celebrating as much as maybe he would have wanted to. Woke up this morning, drove back around 3 hours, got back home, 15 minutes before this race? Not race begun. It was about 30 minutes before the green flag would have dropped, but 15 minutes before the iRacing session would have gone up.
He got back 8 minutes before the start of the session, because that's when he said, I just got home. Would you like to answer some questions? Kind of thing. So in other words, he basically got in just a couple minutes before the race for the sim rig. So basically, not bad to get in from the kart from Chicago straight to the sim rig.
Not bad at all. Good effort. I hope he's got some extra milk lying around just in case he wins. One of the I'm not going to say who it was. One of the drivers made a comment in the iRacing IndyCar community Discord about how they had a order from Costco, which for those outside the US and maybe do not know what Costco is, it's like a grocery store but where everything is bought in bulk. So instead of buying 6 eggs, you buy like 30 eggs. It's maybe an exaggeration, but you get what I'm talking about. And so he had ordered some milk, thinking, oh, in case I win, maybe I'll have some milk. Not only did they send him a giant gallon or whatever, more than a gallon of milk, they sent him 2. So now he's got all of this milk, but he's not drunk yet because he hasn't won this weekend, JP.
I mean, on the bright side, the milk situation's taken care of for the next 2 weeks.
Oh, he's got to drink that milk quickly, though, doesn't he?
It depends on the expiration date, but obviously they'd like to drink both jugs today.
That would be the hope as well. Gustavo Ariel, not a great run out of turn 1 through the short chute, almost checked up those behind, and Lucas Prada holds on. We're on to 28, by the way. This is the magic number where we expect drivers at the front to probably peel off to the left-hand side and make their way down pit lane, but Michael Romanita stays out, extends the run an additional lap, and we'll see what happens behind. Everyone else stays on track as well.
Yeah, just now they started to really kick up the speed. They've been averaging about 220 miles an hour around the start and finish line for the past little bit. They just kicked it up to 230 this time, now that Romanitas is trying to break away from the pack almost. This is going to push a Cabo Easy to have to burn an extra bit of fuel, and everybody else is now going to have to push just to keep up with them. You can see that time differential where it's starting to jump up back to the 41.6s on the deltas. That's where he originally started before going to those 7s. That's where that 220 was at the stripe.
Incredibly consistent. Don't ever think we, are used to seeing times as consistent as that when the, Firestone tires are going off, and maybe that should have been an indication to us that fuel saving the name of the game. Let's see if we are going to see separation because, well, the tanks are being now very much expended. Jason Brophy passes Gustavo Ariel, does not want to wait any longer, needs to get up inside of the top 10. Started back in 15th, maybe down from where he would have wanted to. And what does that mean behind? Well, everyone getting a little bit antsy as well as they fire their way back down towards the north end of the track.
Yeah, that whole pace, by the way, you just seen with the averages kicked up half a second the past 2 laps already. So the entire pack's intensity level just kicked up, knowing it's money, pit stop time coming up. Now it's the question, who comes in first? Who is going to be the first to blink in this? Especially now with the pace increase. the differentials in the pack are really starting to spread out, especially with these track temps rising about a Fahrenheit degree every 5 minutes.
And that's something that as well, we'll keep an eye on the trend in the weather through the remaining 170 odd laps that we have in store. Pinheiro, we ride with him in that BK, the Bread King racing car. He's got his teammate Rodrigo Franzoni directly in front, help potentially. If they're on the comms together, communicating on pit entry, you might want some help if you come into pit lane to swap around, and Michael Romanidis is going to be left all by his lonesome. He dives down to pit lane, and no one else will enter with 30 laps complete.
That's not a surprise at the end of lap 31, in fact, because he let all those laps essentially burn more fuel compared to those in the draft who get to save an extra little bit, maybe that extra gallon or so, compared to those trying to go even half throttle without any aero to push them forward to gain some speed back. Now, who follows suit? That's the huge question. We're already in fuel-safe territory in terms of lap deltas.
And the good thing about leading at Indy is that when you come down to pit lane, you will stay on the lead lap, but only marginally off and away. Romanidis will hustle, and when we say hustle, look how far out wide he goes. You can take advantage through turns 1 and 2. That's about as perfect as you'd like for Romanidis as he works his way back out onto track with a textbook pit stop. Does not get much more perfect than that.
Going to be in great position here, I think, once the pit stop cycle completes itself here, obviously. Right now, for reference, Caboese a 10th off his personal best before that pit stop. Now, it's a matter of who blinks next. Still nobody else has blinked quite yet. Franzoni seems to be trying to set things up angle-wise, but again, everybody's looking great to get to the lap 35 mark.
If they get to lap 35, that would be remarkable as well, as that's Jose Soria, former podium sitter in this race. Down to pit lane, he can only get to the end of lap 33. Remember, those fuel maps probably coming in handy, and even Brandon Trost with that charge forward. Remember, 8 positions gained before we saw Romanidis down to the box. Very, very tidy for him. Let's check in, I guess. Important thing now to wonder is, can Jose Soria try and link up with Michael Romanidis? It was a long pit stop for Soria, though. 13.5 seconds, JP. I think he had to change a front wing. Here comes the rest, though. Pit lane going to be busy.
Yeah, remember Soria with the contact earlier would explain why the extra time there. Going to be a big-time sadness there when it comes to that camp. Going to need the right strategy to get back on cycle. Great entries, though, for Caboese, Trost, and more. That's allowed Philip Kraus to now build his house in the race lead, at least for now.
It's going to be important that all of these drivers who are in pit lane execute. You need to hit your marks. Caboese at the front will have the shortest run then to the pit exit. Do not speed either. So easy to do so. So Trost going to be directly behind. Caboese is off and away they go, a little bit further back to Beliziotis, to Beckham Jasir, and to a handful more. Already have seen Michael Romanidis fly on past. You can see drivers have got the memo about how much track they can use on pit exit. There goes the Greek driver, Romanidis, back around the outside, but directly now into the draft. Caboese slides once more.
And immediately try to snake to try and make sure it's broken right from the get-go. A lot of others calling for pit stop. Philip Kraus doing so this time by his indicated, and several more in the snake train.
What's happened to Jason Brophy? Because I saw that he had to jump in the pit lane. We'll try and get an update from that if we can, because something definitely not right. Here comes, though, rest of those drivers, and it's a high-speed commitment. Who is going to stay out, though? Alessandro Bico has saved a little bit more fuel. Could that be important? He goes on to lap 37, but it's a pit party for the rest.
And nicely done. No major issues for anybody into these pit boxes, it looks like. Just got to get right on the pit box itself here. The top 2 seem in position as everyone else makes their way onto the race jacks, or the pit jacks. Nicely stopped. No major troubles for this service, for this grouping.
It's been tidy, hasn't it? Phil Kraus is going to get off and away first, but that was probably to be expected. Who filters in behind? Where do Caboese and Romanidis end up filing on forward? It's a bit of a repeat of what we had yesterday, where it was a Coanda Esports driver alongside a Caboese swapping at the front. In that case, though, it was Michele Costantini. Out front, though, look at the margin for Phil Kraus up to speed. And this gives us a bit of an insight. They've been able to go to lap 37. Biko, Ferguson, and Lindqvist make their way down to the lane. We've got a fuel-save race on our hands.
And that's what can happen when it goes green like this, right? No cautions to time up, no caution to scramble it out so far at least. Right now, Phil Kraus showing why he's one of the best drivers on the platform in this car on the fixed side. Good pit stop sequence, though, for the further lap for Biko. He's not going to be in the lead group. But already, look at that run outside top window. Traus just squeezed past a combo easy.
He does not want to wait, especially knowing that with the tempo that we're running here, you're not going to have to run 37 laps all the way to the end. By the time we get past lap 100, you'll start to make your stints that little bit shorter. Alexander Van der Sat was on the fuel save yesterday. His 35-lap stints effectively then meant a couple of 31-lap stints at the very end. Gives yourself the margin to play around and be a bit more aggressive. Look, though, at the margin. We've got some separation up and down through the field, but the first time you find yourself outside of drafting range, it's back in 14 to Pablo Espes in the Wave Italy racing car.
And this is right about where drivers expect things to start to break apart. Some of the discussions before today. Pit stops can be the major difference maker depending on the lap time, or better yet, how you enter the pit lane in terms of aggressiveness and also how you exit. For Espes, he's been the biggest mover, but he's going to need a lot of luck to be able to close up these draft packs right now. Essentially, if you end up losing draft like this, it takes a lot of skill to close it up and a lot of luck to do so as well. He's going to need to hope for some luck from Munoz, who is the tail end of this next group.
It's a testament to the skill of the drivers in this top split, right? That we went to, 180-something laps caution-free yesterday, that we've gone a full caution-free cycle already in this race. The first edition back in 2020. 8 cautions, quite remarkably. We had 4 the subsequent year, 5 back in 2022. By no means is this a race where we are expecting the cautions to be thick and heavy amongst all of the action. Instead, we really think that, and the drivers recognize that as well, you could see these long runs. Got to get your fuel cap on and your strategy mind in play from the very start. On board with a Carbo Easy, your pole sitter, Brandon Trost, is up to 3rd. 8 positions gained so far today.
Yeah, when talking with him before today, he expected this car to be, in his opinion, to his preferences, on the very tight side compared to what he drove yesterday. And obviously what he drove yesterday was very, very strong. We've seen the 3-wide finish. Now today, it's going to be where you have to now rely upon the driver skill. And he wanted, quite simply, redemption for how things closed things out yesterday, especially the close finish. He talked about a lot more so with how Kevin Constantini as well was once one of the top qualifiers for this split. Obviously, that took out the teammate equation for this part of the day today to start things off. Now he has to work with the Coanda car more so, and better yet, trying to have to battle with some of those who are not ally members who have been able to jump him in all this.
Michael Romanidis, 2021 Formula 1 esports driver with Williams Esports as well, so he does know his way around open wheel machines. We've seen him in plenty of fixed 500s, and I was mentioning Dominic Lukomsky, a Prodigy Pass winner. He won his Prodigy Pass on the only oval competition that the Prodigy Racing League had. So did Garrett Lowe, but for Michael Romanidis, he's basically competed on all the different platforms that Prodigy Racing League has been on, across so many different cars, and when he eventually got his chance to be in a Radical SR1 just a handful of weeks ago, he really did showcase exactly how quick and consistent he could be. He alongside Gustavo Ariel, Dominic Lukomsky, the 3 drivers in this field who, as mentioned, will be part of the Prodigy Draft later this summer, where 24 sim racers will be signed to pro racing contracts and go racing later on this year in Radical SR1s around the Southeast United States. Let's go back, though, to defending race winner, Casey Kerwin. He's got some work to do in that Spire Motorsports #1.
Yeah, a lot of work. In fact, right now he said quite simply, again on social media, knew he was going to be starting midfield for this one, going to be a challenge. Obviously, it's been a challenge so far to gain the track position. He's now stuck on essentially pack number 2 here. But kind of it's all to where all it takes is one pit stop, right? That changes up the momentum. Better yet, Casey himself seems to be in a full rhythm when it comes to this car. Obviously, a lot more experience on the stock car side, but he's been trying to gain a lot more experience, as we've seen the past year, especially in everything that has a steering wheel, and especially those with an open wheel style rim on it. He's now catching up to an oval style driver and Dylan Ault in front of him because they nearly ran each other over in front.
These are two very, very experienced drivers. Dylan Ault representing, of course, Nexus Esports, but drives for Latar Esports in the big show in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Oh, and Casey almost just found out exactly how potent Dirty Air could be. Almost slid up directly into the path of his rival, but just about backs out in the nick of time. Remember, we had, one retiree in the early stages, rather two, with Dominic Lukomsky and Yeri Lettin, and Sander Nyhoff then out of turn 2, tangled up with Jose Soria. He has also retired. Jason Brophy, the only other driver that is not now in this leading pack, and you got an update from down on pit lane, JP.
Yes, indeed. Someone asked him on the radio, "Where'd you go, Jason? You're running up front with us." Well, you mentioned there was a bit of a blip on pit road. Apparently, he ran out of gas. He's out of gas as he goes to the pit stall. So, hits the brake, misses the pit side. And what Jason has to do, has to tow the car to go back 3 feet.
Okay, let's again just watch where he is now and watch where he's going to get reset to. Our camera has to pan over about 3 feet. Now, Jason Brophy is known for having issues on pit lane. However, they're usually on entry, usually with plenty of smoke involved as well. Hashtag Jason, you did it again. Anyway, stint lengths on your left-hand side of the screen. Remember, we've already, in our first green flag cycle, seen a big difference. And Michael Romanidis out front, I'd be scared. Very, very scared. This race goes caution-free. He's got no chance of being in contention at the very end.
Yeah, that is going to be an interesting one in terms of cycle right now. Romanidis needs it to become attrition-filled, or rather, attrition before the final pit stop window with about 20 to go. Obviously, that is going to be easier said than done today, especially with everyone co-opetitioning up at the front here.
Ooh, I like that word.
Yes, but so far today, it's going right to what all the other drivers throughout the garage and through the paddock said. Just think about getting to those final 20 laps and let the race come to you. Part of that is get the fuel strategy right for the 20 laps to go, and then it will be much easier compared to those having to come back about 30, 40 seconds.
We've discussed it a little bit as well. Let's not forget, team affiliation's going to potentially come into play. Got to give a shout out to the Apex Racing team for their new livery on display, but they've gone to the lengths to make sure one of them has got red highlights, the other's got green. So we can tell Peter Berryman and Luke McEwen apart, but they are right next to one another, 5th and 6th positions. Franzoni, Pinheiros, 8th and 9th, similar sort of a situation. No other teammates really around one another right now. Even with Jason Brophy's pit issue, by the way, he's on the lead lap, so minimize the damage as best as he could. But the Williams Esports teammates all split apart. The two red line cars split apart as well. Nexus through the field. JP, it could all be about every driver for themselves in the closing stages of the race.
I mean, it's a chance for history. I think that's the main expectation for a lot, is in the final couple laps, it's down to who's got the better shot amongst the teammates. The X driver or Y driver. Okay, Y driver, I'm going to take it. If it's down to those two, it's just don't wreck your teammate, race each other respectfully, and go from there. But right now, for a lot of these drivers, they haven't been able to close up yet. That's an expectation with the fixed side, especially how the qualifying went. But a lot of these drivers have had the trouble to get up there. There's that differential, though, the first lap traffic. That interval is shrinking every lap. Even though Brophy's got the green cycle you've seen, right now that is still 9.5 down to 9.4 in this. By the end of this sentence, that difference is going to be 2.
We're saving fuel once again. That's definitely what we're seeing from those at the very front. The problem is, as much as Michael Romanidis is trying to dictate the tempo, can only dictate the salsa so much when you're being led by those behind as well. You're being forced, you're pressured by those behind. Brandon Trost, after all of those moves early doors, settled into a rhythm. And as the temperature continues to cycle upwards, I'm not saying spiral upwards by any means, JP, there's not a lick of cloud cover in the sky. We are a quarter of the way through, 50 laps complete. It's only going to get warmer potentially for the next hour or so.
And I think that's more so with the sun beating down, but also the more laps you turn, the more this run goes, the more heat build up, essentially more energy in the race surface itself, and that's where we're seeing this temperature go up and up and up. And the more it goes up, the more potential is spread out because it comes more and more down to how the tire wear is compared to the cooler temps, where you can go a lot more full throttle and it becomes a lot more speedy around the track. At this point, it's can you save the fronts? Can you save your front Firestones? Make sure you don't burn up those tires here.
Sounds like, by the way, that the race they're having on the streets of the Motor City, race maybe is not the correct way to describe it. A lot of the drivers that I was chatting with before the race here, like the Krauses, the drivers that are doing the double, yesterday's open broadcast, today's fixed broadcast, were saying, you know what, there's a lot of Indy racing. Maybe I'd just like to go and watch the IndyCar race. Jason Brophy decided about 15 minutes before, you know what, YOLO, I'll do it if Rob Milech is going to do it. And then Phil Kraus, I'm not even joking here, about 3 minutes before the session would have started to open, said, I'll do it as well. We peer pressured him into doing it, and then had to try and get his paint situation figured out. So the good news is, as much as, you know, the setup might be slightly different, Indy is Indy. They'll get to grips with it quite quickly, and they have this opening phase of the race to settle in. Alessandro Bica looks like he's about to go to sleep.
Yeah, don't do that in the heart of the traffic, first of all, for those watching. Please do not, well, doze off in the middle of the pack. But better yet, I think Bico's just relaxed. I think he just knows everyone's just riding along and settling in. There's chances to make passes if he so chooses. That's what he's done right now, by the way. You see him in the backdrop because it looks like he didn't like the checkup with Pinheiro at least. But others just need to plot this. That's what we're seeing. It's plotters versus planners here.
Did you see the lap time of the leader last time by? It was a 42.466. This is ludicrous. We're basically crawling around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. We're almost at the in pursuit of the hashtag 42.069 challenge of a 4-lap average qualifying run with some of these drivers. And so Jason Brophy has caught onto the pack, and that's why this intensity has risen so much, because everyone is right on top of one another. Throw a blanket over them and you'll be able to find all the action. Here, by the way, Nate Stewart in the heart of all of this, searches up high. He's behind the hyperstar Brendan Lichtenberg. And you look over his shoulder, you can see the drivers just trying to fan themselves out and look to try and build the speed. Just look at how important the draft is as they work their way down to turn number one.
Now, one-time Open 500 winner, so one of those in the league scene that's been able to win multiple different times with this car. One of those with the stock car experience from the NASCAR side, at least for the RTP ladder as well, that has some of the better experience with this car. But talking with him earlier today, in fact, he mentioned he's got the ability to move forward. The problem is just going to be going forward from where he essentially started. Remember, he was the 31st qualifier for this event. That put him straight on the back foot for the top split itself. Lichtenberg, meanwhile, I think he's just currently driving on the vibes.
Yes, and by the way, there is now nobody, with the exception of Chad Simpson, that has started the feature split of the iRacing Indy 500 as many times as Brendan Lichtenberg. 10 appearances out of 14 years. Incredible stat. And you add to the, now 23 top split starts that he's had as well. And I think if I look in my record books, there are only 2 more drivers that will have more top split appearances than him. That would be Marco Brazil and Michael Chin around the outside, by the way. That was a move and a half from Luke Peters. You can tell that the pace that we're riding at just opens up this opportunity. Did see a couple of drivers decide, you know what, let's get out of this. Let's go down to pit lane. Lucas Lindqvist and Daniel Ferguson, the WSR Esports butt kicker duo, trying to do something different.
Yeah, that is an interesting call right now to come down. Right now, at this point, I don't really think that's the window. But if they think they're not going to make it towards the very end, why not try and take the short stop, I guess, now and then go? that seems to be the only play here. They're still going to have to be on the back foot on the strat.
They have just come out in front of the race leader as well. It's not by a huge margin. So there's some dirty air that Michael Romanidis has now given, but maybe that's exactly what he wants, to have a little bit of help to tow him around so he can save some fuel. They fly past the yard of bricks. What a sight it is. The Dallara IR18s in full song and dance here at the Speedway for the greatest spectacle in sim racing. And I've got to say, JP, this is only the 4th year we've had a fixed 500, but it's such an intriguing addition, right? Because there is a lot to be said about the work that the teams and the drivers do to building the cars to go fast for the open setup qualifying. There's also something to be said, though, for the drivers that can jump in, figure out how to make the car go fast for 16 corners and make the Fast 33 to fight for 200 laps.
Well, in terms of the existence of the race, the counter-argument is there's an NIS open and fixed for stock cars. Why not for the Indy 500? However, it takes a different skill set to drive a fixed car compared to an open race car. An open, you can adjust and tweak everything, as you said, to what you prefer, and then you're good to go. And then you have the adjustments on top of it. For a lot of the others, though, for the fixed side, you have to adjust to the setup. And that takes a skill set in of itself to do it right, to where you can be fast for 20 laps like everyone else, but your method may burn up your tires and hit you into the wall by the very end. It comes down to an almost balancing act. So, it's about being smart, it's about being precise, it's about obviously the communication in terms of getting those adjustments down for the bar, and for any in-car adjustments, since this is the one car for that, you can make those on the fixed side compared to, say, the others on the oval side. It takes a lot of knowledge, and it takes racecraft to get this done.
And one thing to keep in mind for the teammates up front is that they now have got to figure out the method of swapping back and forth to build the speed, to slingshot one another at each end of the racetrack. Down at turn 1, it's going to be Daniel Ferguson that makes his way on forward. Lucas Lindqvist, the driver that he's going to be working with here as they try and build up the speed. They did a 41.418 last time by. So that's what, a full second or so quicker than what we were doing, 10 laps ago?
Yeah, I wonder what may be the factor in it. It may or may not be involving those who now lead the draft, essentially, those at the tail of the lead lap. I think that's absolutely helping right now for Romanidis, because it takes a little bit of weight off him almost compared to the constant save. Oh, an interesting one. The 7 is in.
I think Michael Romanidis, 30 laps in, could not go any longer, even with the slight assistance he was getting from the teammates that were swapping at the front. So, we've hit the next cycle of pit stops. 26 laps into the run for your race leader. Look on the left side of the screen. You'll see those stint numbers pop up on the left-hand side timing tower. Remember, we expect at most potentially 35 laps. They went as long as 37, though, in the previous window. I couldn't quite say, though, that they're going to do it this time by.
Yeah, remember, when it comes to those types of runs, usually you have to knock an extra lap or two off because of the extra time at full speed compared to, say, where we started off on the pace laps for that fuel strategy. And we're talking about, as well, many of these drivers starting to really spread apart and not have as much draft to be able to feed them and save fuel off of. When you have gaps like this, it's much harder to save compared to those when you're a car length back or something along those lines. So this means everyone's burning up those extra little tenths of a gallon more per lap compared to when they're all bunched up and compressed in the first 30.
See that helmet over the shoulder of Gustavo Ario, by the way, designed by someone that did Lewis Hamilton's helmets for about 3 years. So Gustavo's got a helmet that he'll very much treasure for quite a long time, you think, and imagine all the stories and memories that he's built up in some of the opportunities that he's had over the years that sim racing has given him. We're on to 65 of 200 laps, not even halfway through, but about 90 minutes to go. Can't believe I'm saying this. We've been caution-free so far today, JP, as I knock on the wood around me.
Yeah, there's always so many desks and so many pieces of wood you can knock on before it becomes a jinx, right? It is top split. You expect the racecraft to be high. You expect the racing to be clean. And especially knowing what's at stake, you know what the limitations are. You make a mistake, your chances are done. And you potentially take several drivers with you who end up becoming frenemies as a result of it. You don't want to end up risking your race before you even get to the halfway mark, let alone the final 20 laps for a W.
You know how when children are growing up, parents will like have a wall in the house where you like slowly mark off how their kids are growing? We need something like that for the drink on Lucas Prada. How quickly is he consuming the beverage so that he doesn't have to go to the bathroom across the 500 miles?
Is it just me, or is that more drink in the cup than there is less?
I don't even know what to think about that possibility. It's very possible, though. Now, choice of beverage is important as well, because as Jason Brophy down to pit lane 30 laps in, so I think, remember, he had to burn a bunch of fuel to catch back up to the pack, so that probably slightly compromised him. Michael Romanidis out in clean air, runs by himself, 41.239 last time by, but, you know, some drivers like a caffeinated beverage, an energy drink. Some drivers just prefer, you know, good old water or, you know, some sort of mixture that they'll concoct themselves. You've got to find something that works for you, though, JP, because you don't want to be all jittery when you're sitting in your rig for potentially 3-4 hours.
Oh, caution!
And Nate Stewart stationary on track, and that's down at turn 4.
Yeah, towards the back in 22nd. I believe he's running side by side with Jose Soria, who already had a wing change this race. And just like that, throw the strategy out the window, and we've ran out of wood to knock on.
Oh, well, it does mean that Jason Brophy is 1 lap down. Oh, and I don't think he'll get the lap back either. That could have been a lot more significant. A lot more significant. Couple more looks at it on the replay, JP, and you can see the side-by-side. A little bit of air between them potentially, and then trying to hold on in the grass, hoping it's not a damaged race car.
Yeah, that was a very tight, tough slide there. I think the car looks to be okay. It could have been much worse if there was even a slam to the right side. He kept it just off the outside wall, slid it to keep it off the inside. Just nothing he could do to keep it off the racing surface, obviously.
So Nate Stewart involved in what brings an incident that brings out what is the first caution, albeit with already Sander Nyhoff, Dominic Lukomsky, and Jari Lehtinen retired from the race. Now, Jose Soria, I don't think the pits are going to be open just yet, but he has gone straight down to pit lane. That's a sign of a damaged race car.
And there might have been a slice of taps via air. We'll see if there's the wing change here. There isn't mandatory repairs in session, but this now equalizes all the strategies. On the note, though, this came at the wrong time. If you're Romanidis in particular, you needed this to go green and then equalize around midway to the run. Now he's going to be back in track position, but he's going to be still off cycle, in theory, with Ferguson and Lindquist as a result of this top of the caution flag.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. You could probably come in for just fuel, and I think that would be my call. I don't know how brave he's feeling, though. Here we go. This is important. Who wins on pit lane? Watch them fan out. They can run through one another if they're careful. Got to be very, very clear with when you make that contact. And JP off and away from pit lane. They've got to drop the clutch effectively as well.
Yeah, this is going to be an important time to make sure we don't have any similar slide-throughs the box earlier on, have any issues where someone runs out, especially with us close to the fuel window before. Seems like everybody got on their jacks, though, pretty efficiently already. No drop of the clutch yet for Caboese, but a great run off the exit. How about Berryman to the point?
And so Berryman will win that race off and away at Caboese, then Trost and Luke McEwen out in front of Phil Krause. You can see those behind. A long gap back to the likes of Diogo Pinto, potentially Gustavo Ariel, and a couple of the other drivers as pit lane sees the final drivers off and away. So Ferguson, Lindqvist, and Romanidis, the three that elect to stay out there and are very much off sequence from the rest of the drivers.
The bet's made essentially with the time of the yellow flag. Interesting for Ferguson and Lindqvist in that regard. Obviously, though, the play simple. Caution, break cautions, get on the same cycle maybe, hope for the track position in about 15 laps to beneath it to go from there. And obviously, You throw into the mix, though, Jason Brophy, your only car a lap down, is right in the heart of the battle for the race lead coming up here with Berryman right behind him. He's going to have to play this very smart, knowing he's going to be surrounded by those on freshlies behind him.
It's frustrating, I'm sure, in some ways for him, but I think his best chance, as we'll cross lap 70 at the Yard of Bricks, is going to be maybe to try and use, because you'll have fresher tires than both of the WSR Esports machines and the Coanda Esports driver up front. Try and get to the front and lead. Yes, you'll burn some fuel, but we know cautions breed cautions. All he needs is to be at the front when the caution comes out, and boom, he'll get waved around right back onto the lead lap.
Similar to that, the strategy essentially to what Michael needs to have happen here as Nate Stewart comes in and tops off again after the save. In the words of Nate Stewart after the save, what a save by the driver indeed. But it looks like, again, their play now, if you're at the very back here, is you just have to try and stretch the gas tank even more. You no longer have track position as a benefit.
Was that said in the iRacing sim chat? What a save.
I'm going to guess, and I can take a look to my left, it would be involving the iRacing Twitch.
Ooh,
so
nice.
So we like to promote that we do not recommend you text and drive while in top split or in any split.
The only time it's acceptable is under caution, and I'm saying that right now because I know somewhere Robert Malechka's listening, and his fingers are twitching. He's like, get me into chat, it's time for me to shine. He does love a cheeky message while racing under green flag conditions as well, if we're being honest. Although he's so sideways that I don't know if he'll be able to find the keyboard, or maybe it's going to come out all gibberish. I'm not sure. Lights are off on the pace car, so we are getting ready to go back racing. It is going to be Michael Romanidis that is at the front. Remember, with 3 drivers slightly now off sequence, with 1 driver as well a lap down between those that came down to pit lane. 71 laps complete, still a long way to go in the 4th running of the iRacing Fixed 500. Let's turn up the sound of the engines on the restart. They look like jet fighters, they sound like jet fighters. Oh, they're as cool as jet fighters. 72 laps complete here in the iRacing Fixed 500, and Daniel Ferguson, Lucas Lindqvist have taken the point. Michael Romanidis back in 3rd as he tries to save some fuel and ride in line.
And remember, those 2 up at the very front have the least fuel on hand, so should be expected to see them lead, be able to work off them knowing they're going to have to burn up much more quicker. Now, everybody else, though, in that train that's starting to build up behind them, it's going to be interesting. You have Brophy, where looks like he's just up on the wheel and saying, let's keep this steady, let's keep this steady. He is someone who works on the spotter stand on the eNASCAR side, too, after all, so he knows how to keep composed in tight situations.
He's been busy as well. eNASCAR was racing on Tuesday night. Still, of course, focused on the qualifying grind. Thursday and Friday were slogs for the private label Team Hype crew as well. And before what was a very, very good race run on Saturday, Jason Brophy grabbing 2nd. I don't think he would have expected that. Brandon Trost around the outside, grabs a couple of spots, past the Carboeasy, past Peter Berryman, and now up into what is net race lead. He's behind Romanidis, behind Lindqvist, and behind Ferguson. Is that exactly, though, what the rest of the drivers want? Carboeasy looks up high on Berryman.
Yeah, it seems like Carboeasy wants to get some of that track position back. Obviously, had an extra second or so before the drop of the clutch from the pit box to be able to fill it all the way to the top. Berryman just had the better timing in said box. It's going to be tricky to come back right now, but others we know that can come back quickly. Philip Kraus, he's been one of the better ones on green flag stops so far today. We also know he knows how to get through the traffic, just not the time yet to fully push, especially knowing the top two are just in draft switch mode to try and run away.
They are very, very close, I fear, to breaking out of the draft as well. Jason Brophy very much the one that is linking them up a little bit further back in the pack, of course. You've still got drivers all arguing for their own little bit of track position. Diogo Pinto's been having a quiet day. He battles with Chris Van Den Ness in the Megiars machine, running down in towards turn 3. He's only up 3 positions so far, and this is one thing that is very important at Indy. Qualifying poorly, it leaves you with a lot of work to do in the race.
Exactly, and we touched upon that for a lot of these teams. It's quite simple. If you're in the back, you're forced into the strat of just wait in line, be patient, let attrition come to you. But when attrition doesn't come to you, it's extremely difficult to be able to get much traction in a field like this today with everyone so near dead even. And with all the talking points about the aero lock and the aero push, and amidst this passing, and especially knowing that third line's been very powerful to get the run back if you do get to the inside. You basically need to clear anybody you try and make a move on by the apex of the corner, which is very, very difficult in the first place unless you get a trap mid-straightaway, which is very difficult unless you have a massive run or there's a mistake coming out of a corner.
His shirt, by the way, 10 out of 10. Of course, the famous quote, "You don't know what Indy means." We know what Indy means. That's why we're here on a Sunday afternoon when they're racing on the streets of the Motor City. I say racing again, more of a demolition derby from everything that I have gathered, and it doesn't seem like it's going any better as the laps tick away. We are, almost 80 laps complete of our 200. We started, 30 minutes or so after the guys at IndyCar got their race underway. They should probably be done with their race by now. They're on to lap 71.
Yeah, that race blistering through for some, but I think in terms of the Brickyard itself, in terms of Indianapolis Motor Speedway with the history over the decades and now more than 100 plus years, it's a racetrack that lives up to its name. It's a track that lives up to its traditions. If you want to be able to win here, you have to honor said traditions, but better yet, you have to honor said legacy that people in front of you have built up over the years. You have to be able to conquer those who've been able to set said legacies and build the destinies of a race like this. And so far today, amongst some of those veterans, yes, it's been tricky for some of them who did not get the track position, like we said with Casey Kerwin. But in terms of some of your top drivers on the platform, they've kind of set the stones and set the table saying, if you want to get this win, you've got to beat 15, 20, 30, any of the best when it comes to this car.
See a comment in the Twitch chat, what's it like to do a 500 without a yellow every 3 laps? It looks like fun. Yeah, some of the lowest splits maybe will have some more questionable racecraft, but at the end of the day, every split is very important, and as long as you get to drink the milk, that's really all that matters at the end of the day. So survival, the name of the game, even here in top split, where 33 took the green. Sander Nijhoff, Dominic Lukomski, and Jari Lehtinen, the 3 DNFs, with Jason Brophy down 1 lap, and Luke Peters having to serve a drive-through penalty. He is now out of the leading group and running all by himself, all as the teammates swapping back and forth, get closer and closer to re-entering pit lane. 24 laps around, about to be 25 laps into the run.
Yeah, for all these drivers that are on the off-cycle situation, quite simple. You're doing the caution dance right now, and that's obviously easier said than done. A lot of swap draft to try and help each other save fuel and keep the tempo high amongst these two, and Ferguson and Lindquist, as we expected when it comes to teammates, to coordinate here with WSR, looking to put their name to the forefront after all here today. They're going to need something to happen pretty soon in this cycle if they want to get back on the right foot and get the track position back. Otherwise, they'll have to do the same song and dance again in about 15, 20 laps and hope for some luck then.
When it comes to a relatively new team, success, the very first iRacing special event of the year, the iRacing Daytona 24, the first of the VCO Grand Slams, where they came out on top in a pretty what was nutty in many ways, LMP2 class. Since then, had some decent runs through some various private leagues and whatnot that we cover on RaceSpotTV, but still searching for maybe that success. And Daniel Ferguson, their team manager, was messaging me a couple of weeks ago asking for some tips around Indy. And we're seeing some of the fruits of all of that work as they run at the front of the field at the racing capital of the world. There, though, is Michael Romanidis, the one driver that in around, 6 laps time or so is going to be left by himself, I would feel. Yes, Jason Brophy will take over the race lead and would be the one that would grab his wave around on the lap back. But Romanidis, you say doing the caution dance, I'm a bit surprised in many ways that he did not come down the previous time by, because he's committed no matter what at this point. I would have probably wanted to try and give myself some chance to try and fight back through the field.
The thing is, I don't like going from 28 to the race lead, even in the course of a 3/4 portion of a race. Track position is so difficult to get here. It's so difficult to get it. We've seen from anybody in the teams today, it's been a tough challenge. Pablo Espez, we mentioned, who gained 10 spots earlier in this race to start off the opening run. He just made the pass for the first time to go up plus 11 right as it finished the sentence. That's how tricky it's been for even him to get these positions. And we know Espez knows how to slice his way through a field in an open-wheel race car in the World Championships. That's how tricky it is.
The first move in about 7 minutes that wasn't Diogo Pinto and Chris Van der Nest swapping around a little bit further down through the field. That is how tough it is right now. And we were mentioning as well conditions likely to continue to not spiral upwards, but to creep upwards. We might have reached that peak, 127 degrees Fahrenheit. We'll keep an eye on that as we get towards the latter end of this race. What will the Firestone tires be doing underneath the drivers as they come on in for the final top off of fuel as well? Seen some crazy finishes in the past, and we talked about in the pit stop cycle, JP, getting away from pit lane. Alexander Van der Sant, who was in contention back in 2022 for the Fixed 500 win, one thing that he has been very, very good at, releasing himself from pit lane and losing as little time as possible relative to the rest of the field.
That takes a lot of preciseness, but also better yet, it takes practice. And for a lot of top drivers, whether it's on the road side, whether it's on the stock car side, whether it's obviously now going to be on the IndyCar side with the championships coming up there, it takes preciseness to know how the limits are of the car. Bit of kick up of smoke as Biko, I think, just scraped the right side tires against the wall up the road here. But I will say this, if you want to execute any of this, you have to know the limitations of the car. You can't just go into a race and then say, I'm just going to go at this braking mark. In many cases, we've seen it today, it's been a 1 to 2 second difference on each entry and exit just for the moves, and that's where Phil Krause had a chance for the race lead before after the first pit stop cycle. You enter the pit lane efficiently without speeding and exit efficiently while maximizing speed and getting the luck of the positioning here. You position yourself much better than those who take it extremely conservative, you know, not knowing the limits, and then you're behind 5 seconds of pit stop.
Shannon Munoz almost drove himself directly into the wall off of turn 4. You heard the lift off on the throttle. These drivers are feeling the pain, and here come the leaders. It's Lindqvist and Ferguson into the box, and they've got one of the earliest stalls as well, so very quickly trying to get themselves situated and finding their flag man as Jason Brophy, now technically back on the lead lap, is at the front of the field with Michael Romanidis and Brandon Strouse directly behind. Peter Berryman, Akabuizi, and Luke McEwen, the rest of the top 5. Probably at most 6 or so laps for Romanidis back down onto pit lane.
Yeah, right now, Romanidis needs some luck of anything right now. But you know who would be net leader? We talked about Brandon Strouse trying to push a lot before. He's currently in second on this racetrack. For someone that's been so aggressive early on in the run, he's still been solid in terms of getting about the middle of the fuel range of the race here today. He might be someone, if he keeps this up, and keeps himself in position, he might have the best of the aggressiveness at least to be able to make a move work and hold off, say, a Berryman.
I feel like he is also the one that has done the work early, got to the front, and now just waiting to see how it plays out. We were talking about that with the caution dance. He's indifferent. He can save some fuel from Romanidis in front. He can try and extend the margin to those behind. And the pace has picked up as well. We're in the low 41s, so very much seeing the drivers not saving the fuel that they were doing in the early stages of this race. Still again, with a handful more pit stops to go, and only one caution so far today. The teammates have cycled back out with one another, as you'd suspect, and we're trying to swap together. Remember, they are the ones that are on the contra strategy. The only ones really going to be trying something different. Luke Peters with the speeding penalty has dropped down and running by himself. If the teammates can link up with him, I wonder if this pack can build up even more speed.
I think right now for Luke, it's going to be a tough time for the rest of the way regardless right now. I think if they hook up with them, if anything, might scramble some of the strategy. For reference, Ferguson and Lindquist on the gold tires right now, 41.2s. They are just fine on their own. Peters, he's running right now in terms of pace. He's been, even since the Pelony situation, been running 42 flats to 41.7s, rarely in the 41.3s. So he's kind of been unproven as a lead car for a pack so far today. He's been mired either in traffic or been on his own, and I don't know how they're going to handle it. I wouldn't be surprised if they just say, we got to make this pass quick and then get it over with like a Band-Aid.
Remember, they are the ones swapping back and forth and having that little bit of extra speed as compared to Luke Peters running by himself. Back with your main pack, though, where the drivers are still very much latched on top of one another. Pablo Espez made that move on Alessandro Bico. Now, eyes up trying to get past Gustavo Ariel. That would be a 14th position gain so far today. And Ariel's lost a little bit of ground and a couple of car lengths to his Brazilian counterpart, Adriano Pinheiro, in front. The BK Racing duo, Franzoni Pinheiro, running very, very steady. And up high, Espez works on the car.
Yeah, just trying to keep the clean air on the nose, use that third line. That's been pretty solid to build up some momentum down the long straightaways today. And I've talked about this with a few drivers over the years, remember, where a lot of talk has been, do I do it both ends in the midst of 1 and 2 and then 3 and 4? Do I do it in just turns 2 and 4? Do anything along those lines? It's kind of a balancing act. It's about choice. Better yet, it's about what's going on with the car in front, right? In this case, Espez knows he's got a car from the high side that can make moves, and it looks like at the very least, Ariel's saying, I know you're quicker. You've been the biggest mover. Go right on ahead.
And this is the final time slot for the iRacing 500s, both the fixed and the open. So there's been, 7 previous races that drivers have had the chance to go out and drive. I did see that there was one driver that had the chance, if they did all 500 miles in this fixed 500, would have done 2,000 miles, all 4 time slots. That's remarkable. There were, I have to go back and find the stat that it was Jason Brophy had posted, I think it was, but it was 800, sorry, David Graybill. 38 drivers have tried to do all 4 of the open time slots. Only 2 drivers ran 800 laps. So congratulations to them. I hope they've got the rest of the week booked off work.
Well, it does take a lot of you, but some people just love the track so much and love this combination, having the Indy 500 back in iRacing so much that, you know what? I'll take the fatigue. I'm just going to run every single race possible because I love this car.
We had to bully a couple of the drivers into being here today. We'll be honest in saying that. We've already admitted Jason Brophy, Phil Kraus, somewhat peer pressured by the fact that Rob Malechka's here to try and do the double. I guess you know what? Phil Kraus didn't feel motivated by the fact that he could become the, first repeat winner of this iRacing Fixed 500. Apparently that wasn't enough motivation. No, he needed Rob Malechka to be here to try and become the first driver to ever win the Open and Fixed 500s in the very same year. And this is the only year that JP, he'll be able to say, if he does it, he did it on the same weekend. Assumption is next year, when this race moves back to its traditional race weekend, which is a couple of weeks before the real 500, It'll be on 2 different weekends, and we'll have drivers allowed to do their full focus on both of the competitions.
And that was around what we've seen previously, I believe, too, around 2022 most recently. So it should make sense in that regard if it does indeed be the case. Now, that being said, to be able to be those in the distinction to win 2 times in 2 days is a lot more prestigious. Romanitas, he's going to have to find pit road and find the pit crew who look to have a very efficient pit stop.
This has got to be a good one for him. Cannot afford to slide through the box and lose out to the WSR Esports duo that are continuing to go back and forth. We'll watch it on the bottom of the screen as your leaders continue to circulate, with Brandon Trost getting ready to lead the lap, with, of course, Jason Brophy still giving that bit of draft. Now, 9.3 stationary for Romanitas, so pretty good stop from cone to cone. It's 34.9 seconds, so very, very good. But he's gone a little bit longer, saved a bit more fuel. There come the teammates around the outside. Coming through turn 2, Romanitas going to slide directly into their draft.
Good placement, good positioning. Not going to be able to break up the teammates, but at least be able to hook on to the caboose and say, okay, I'm going to watch this switch back and forth. I'm right where I need to be. Much better than before. Like I said, you get a good pit stop, good entry, good exit, you gain a second. Guess what? Romanitas, before the pit stop cycle started up for those cars in front, a second back, he closed the gap.
Ride with Phil Kraus in the private label Team Hype machine. Sits in 5th position. Started, of course, up on the outside of the front row. And in terms of lap time comparison to your race leader, it's neither here nor there. It's pretty equal. Brandon Trost does have some separation. He has broken away from those behind. Last time by, went 4/10 quicker. Is this going to play out, JP? He's got no help around him now. Is he just trying to hold on to the back of Jason Brophy?
That's a great question. I know there was a question on the radio, in fact. How are you running so quickly? He said, I don't know. And then responded by nearly spinning the car. Last time for the short shoot through 1 and 2. So Trouts is just on push mode. No longer having to deal with the lap car in front for Brophy. He's just saying, I'm going to go for a run for it. Even though he is near snap loose hitting these curbs compared to those behind, who are running a similar pace right now, but are taking a more efficient line for the tires.
Yeah, I think right now what it also is halfway through this race, we've only had that 1 caution period. Have these drivers recognize that this might be a cycle that gives them track position or lose them track position. Remember, we saw Jason Brophy slide through the box, have to reset, take the tow because he was out of fuel. That cost him ground, cost him strategy. Cannot afford another mistake like that. No one down to pit lane, though, onto the 32nd lap of the run.
At least not scheduled at the very front of the field. Ken say Casey Carlin just ducked into the pit lane. So at the cross flags just completed already. Looks like quite simply strategy from here for some. About 2 more pit stops in theory, as late as 30 to go to complete the window if you were to go 35-35. Or you can split it quite simply 33 apiece if you get from here.
Temperatures, again, remember, not likely to climb too much more. So if you want to make any adjustments in terms of where you've got your in-car tools, you've probably got them pretty dialed in. Brandon Trost departs off to pit lane. Where do the rest now end up filtering on through? It's Berryman, Akabuizi, and then Luke McEwen, your now top 3 as they ride. There goes Kerwin off from pit lane. The danger for him, of course, is because he was buried so deep in the field, he finds himself exiting pit lane and now officially down a lap, although I think Berryman jinking to the left may be indicating he's not far from following him down to the lane.
Yeah, it's straight to the party indeed for Kerwin, to say the least. So now I think it's going to be, where does Berryman get the arc down? There it is, straight to the pit lane. No one else following, giving him the space. Great line, great angle for Berryman down below. Kerwin should get the lap back pretty quickly here, with them full swing for the cycle. But this is going to be somewhat helpful to be able to gauge how the rest of the leaders have been racing.
And so following in Berryman is Rodrigo Franzoni and Zeke Willis. Now, still waiting for Akabuizi to come in from the very front of the field, but you can see that Casey Kerwin now has given a little bit more separation back to Luke McEwen. And these are those margins that pit cycles are all about. Will Akabuizi make the left this time by? He's been so good this month of May, deprived of a chance to fight yesterday. And here he comes onto the lane. No speeding penalty this time. It's a nice tidy execution as a couple more drivers follow on in.
It was close though. He was at 62 miles an hour at the cone. Remember, up to the first sector essentially forced these pit lanes. Now it's going to be interesting where it all cycles, knowing Philip Kraus was one of the best when it came to the first green flag cycles of the race today. Looks like no major troubles as everyone else gets to the box. Box this time for Kraus. Box for Mleczka.
And remember that 105 or so was one of the numbers that some of the drivers were targeting yesterday in 35 lap stints in clean running. There's Diogo Pinto on the bottom of your screen, one of the final drivers that will make their way down to the lane. Hamilton Akabuizi is going to come out just behind Brandon Trost. No surprise there. Let's keep an eye on Phil Kraus, Rob Mleczka into pit lane. And what are they plotting with Munoz, Beliciotis, Jasir, Pinto, and Van den Ness following them in?
Good move as well on the bottom screen. Berryman able to get the pole quickly. Had to make a smart move and a smart decision very quickly. But those coming off from the pit lane going to have to be very quick once they get down here. Kraus had to take a much slower roll. Mleczka to the third, if anything, had a better pit stop.
There's the clutch drop as well. There's the speed. Teammates swapping up front with still Brophy directly behind Ferguson and Lindqvist. But this cycle, boy, is it very much changing, I think, how the rest of this race is going to play on out. Off and away, merging back up onto track. Where do Kraus and Mleczka feed? There goes McEwen directly on through. He's about 1.3 seconds back from Hamilton and Akabuizi. You can see the separation is built. That is what we were talking about. Green flag pit stop cycle in the books once more.
And I'm liking how the movements are going, though, for Berryman and all this. He's still in that conversation. Net second on those on the equal strategy here. He made it clear, wanted to make up for the run. Try and learn this car. Try and prepare for that championship we referred to later on in the year. Try and showcase that he can drive the multiple different cars. Get used to the tires. It's pretty clear that so far Berryman's gotten used to these tires for this car.
And late in the race, you're getting that racecraft built up, the awareness of various different situations, the likes of which you can only get from being here at the Speedway. Now, at the front, I'm pretty sure Jason Brophy has inserted himself into the mix. Yes, he has gotten in front of Lucas Lindqvist. What will he do with Daniel Ferguson? He will want to make sure he is at the front if a caution flies behind, because right now, if it did come out, he's back on the leading lap.
Yeah, and he still hasn't come up towards Peters. Oh, Ferguson hit the wall. Ferguson just scraped the side pod against the wall, and that's what I refer to. You get tied in the short shoot in 1 and 2. That's where it's more common this time here when it comes to this. You're on the platform of the track.
It's so easy to make these small mistakes as well. Here's a look at the replay. You can see the right sides grazing the wall. It looks less dramatic. Behind the wheel, he would have been hot and bothered behind the collar.
Yeah, and right there is where the Aero Wash really takes you. You see that go up that extra near quarter car lane. That quarter car lane's the difference between flush to the wall and, well, distant to the wall that we've seen for Brophy. Looks to be able to keep up for now. Doesn't seem to be too hurt yet. No meatball flags in session.
At least just yet. Question will be side pod damage, maybe some front wing end plate damage. Remember, Jose Soria had to come in for a slightly longer pit stop. Had to do it last time by as well, so he's just not having the best of days, and his crew working on his car as best as they can. But with 109 laps in the books at the Yard of Bricks, 33 started, are we down to 27 contenders left in this leading pack? Jose Soria, Luke Peters, and Jason Brophy still running, but now I think not necessarily a factor unless cautions were to mix things up. Instead, you go back to the likes of Romanidis and Trost to find where the strategy differences play themselves out. And Brandon Trost looking like he doesn't want to wait too much longer behind Michael Romanidis.
Yeah, especially with them trying to charge up within a tenth or so. It's just the Aero Wash that seems to be the major slowdown point. Trying to just run as low distance as possible. Trying to get the arcs down, trying to get the diamonds down too, to try and close this up faster here knowing that Romaninas is in full fuel-safe situation mode. I think Brandon, at this point, the Pennsylvania-based drivers just had everything say, I like being aggressive. It's worked for me so far. It's kind of worked for him so far in general.
What will happen when everyone else is getting more physical and more aggressive at the end, though? Will he respond in kind? Will it lead to the inevitable deluge of cautions that some of these drivers were slightly worried about? Remember, if you're just joining us, we've about got 61 minutes of racing left if we go green. And we've had just the one caution so far, more than halfway through this fourth running of the iRacing Fixed 500. Go back to 2020 when Sage Karen won in a race where 8 cautions interrupted proceedings. Then in 21, it was Phil Kraus on top, just 4 cautions through the course of the day. And then 2 years ago, Casey Kerwin, eNASCAR's own, your winner in dramatic fashion with 5 cautions interrupting proceedings. If it's going to see us get to 8 cautions, it's basically going to be pretty constant from this point forward, and none of the drivers have shown the willingness to force the issue. The setup maybe not letting them force the issue. Akabueasy gets past Peter Berryman.
Nicely done high side again. It was touched upon. That was the expectation with the setup compared to that. And a lot of drivers talked about, Akabueasy in particular, referred to using unconventional tool usage compared to what he's used to. And so far today, despite the unconventionalness, I guess you could say, of adjusting the bar, adjusting everything you can for the handling, he's been able to adjust pretty quickly now that it's getting critical time, knowing you're a couple pit stops away, if that, to close out this race. And I think he also knows you can't be stuck behind, say, Berryman. Kraus is now stuck behind him.
Yeah, Kraus has got to get past Luke McEwen as well. And we're heading into the business end of the race. Like you say, you need to make sure you're climbing your way forward, putting yourself in contention. We had, realistically, at the end of yesterday's iRacing Indy 500 open race, the 14th running of it, 6 or 7 cars until the late caution that had a chance of winning. Kraus just gets too close through the short chute. Has to now try and work off of turn 2. You can see in the inset box how much momentum he then loses, though, because he can't get the speed on exit, can't get the slingshot, and frustrated down to the north end of the track.
Yeah, again, that outside line still is there to grip up, to be able to set up the pass. The problem's going to be, again, as this day goes towards the final stages, we've seen a lot of the give and take in the first place, where you get alongside, someone will let you go in some positions. Eventually, they're not going to want to let you go when it becomes defensive line. It might become one of those situations where a move like Joseph Newgarden comes into play for the high side to be able to determine this race.
I mean, I was down at turn 1 and 2 for the 108th running of the Indy 500. Very glad to be there with Team i5G and watching all of the fun. So all the crashes were, but I've got to say, some of the passes around the outside on restart blew my mind how committed the drivers were. Joseph Newgarden's pass to take the win from Pato Award, worthy of being crowned champion here at the Speedway. Phil Kraus still working. Now 2 times he's got to the inside of Luke McEwen. 2 times he's been fended off, given the Pruitt fade, if you will. He's being frustrated. They're only 10 laps into the run.
Oh, and Kraus just about followed the arrow wash straight to the wall, and that's the tough thing when you have to back out for a pass attempt like that. Take a shower angle. The arrow wash taking him up almost like, because the flat entry, much more higher on exit. That's where the normal paths go in. It's going to take another 3-4 laps for Kraus to reset this move attempt on McEwen.
And in those couple of laps that it's going to take, might get your leaders down onto pit lane, given that Ferguson and Lindqvist have just ticked on over onto the 28th lap of the run. They both started buried back in the pack. 31st for Ferguson, 32nd for Lindqvist, but they went bold on the strategy. The only one to try and do something different. Still a long way to go to see if it will pay out, and to see if there's anyone on the strategy box that will share in the drinking of the milk. I was just looking in sim. There's only 2 drivers that have got spotters in the sim. Doesn't mean there's only 2 drivers with spotters, period. But Chris van der Ness has got some of the help from the Megiar's team. And Brendan Lichtenberg has not got one, not two, but three different people in sim helping him. Jacob Oster, Christopher Demerit, and AJ Burden of Team I5G crewing him behind the scenes.
The funny thing is, Jacob Oster and Christopher Demerit were also part of the top 30, but instead said after seeing how close Brendan, I think, got yesterday, why not help Brendan? Why not try and help the people's champion after all? He's built himself a lot of good speed, obviously, when it comes to his community, but also better yet, the amount of work he puts in on the social side, the amount of work he and I5G have now put in to be able to build the content side. It's built a great rapport with those, with what he's been able to do on the YouTube side, especially as one of the fans with some of the content they put up. The community loves it, and I know iRacing's taken notice, especially those wild community races as of the past every season.
Hey, I'm pretty sure they got noticed it wasn't at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I think it might have been when they went to go watch the Little 500, but Brendan got recognized a couple of different times. So, yeah, great to see that people recognize the effort put in from them, and as well to try and grow the community with guides and whatnot. It's not always just memes and what, but some of the more serious stuff as well. Teammates down to pit lane for WSR Esports Butt Kicker. Seems as though they've had a pretty undramatic cycle as they roll back out onto track, and we cross onto the 120th lap of the race. Still decent amount of this race to go, of course, in terms of pit stops. Arjuna Kankipati alongside of Justin Prince as we bring you the action uninterrupted, with the exception of the glorious rumble of the Dallara IR18 and a car. It's going to be very interesting, JP, how it looks like when it goes racing. The next time it goes oval racing will be with a hybrid. It's going to be introduced at Mid-Ohio. No idea how that's going to work when we only turn left.
Yeah, that is an interesting conversation point, because obviously there's been a lot of work put in. Originally that was a talking point for the start of the season, got pushed back towards that Mid-Ohio date now. It's going to be important, I think, if you're from the sports side, to hope it's in the right window, because I know that sounds generic, but quite simply, it's important to get the engine package right, with a lot at stake on the IndyCar side, to say the very least, especially in the competition side. If you are the first in that wave on the hybrid for at least the North American major sports there in motorsports to get it done right, it opens up the floodgates for everyone else.
Of course, IMSA with their very, very successful hybridization so far, kind of paving the way, but a couple of hiccups along the way. Very, very interesting to see how it goes. Gonna hopefully introduce a new element to the oval racing. I think it's fair to say the Speedway package is pretty great. We had a great running of the 108th Indianapolis 500. It's just now how do we bring that to maybe some of the shorter ovals and maybe things like that. On to what will be, by the way, the 25th lap of the run for your race leader, Michael Romanidis. You can see Jason Brophy just clear, trying to keep himself just out of arm's reach. He will, again, the caution flew right now, stay on the leading lap. He's not far away from having to dive his way, though, onto the box and cycle one lap down once more. It's that time of the race where, JP, if you're off cycle and hoping it comes back to you, get your caution dance going right now.
I think at this point, Michael's strategy dance has been going on for now near 50 laps, you can argue. Quite simply, it's going to be a tough window the rest of the way. If it holds on fuel, it will really be... Oh, that might change something.
That's Nate Stewart, isn't it? In what is a very, very broken race car. And can't really get much of a reaction from the face as he tries to putter his way back to the track, pit lane. But as he rolls around the track, interesting that, JP, that is now the third different incident where a caution has not been brought out.
And guess where it happened? 1 and 2, short shoe. He had some arrow wash from a car 5 car lengths up. Bam! This time, straight on into the inside wall with the momentum. And that's where experience and racecraft comes in with this race car. Just not in terms of the setup in particular. Right there, he missed the bottom, arrow wash, right to the wall, and then you lose control from there. Lift
early is the first thing I got taught when I was transitioning over to the Indy car. A little bit too late there, I think, unfortunately, and Nate Stewart becomes the 4th DNF, I would assume. Sander Nyhoff, Dominic Lukomsky, and Jari Lehtinen watching on from the sidelines And now one more potentially to join the pile. 75 laps to go. And remember, if a full fuel window is sitting at around 29 to 35 laps, somewhere in that sort of a ballpark, don't have many pit stops left to go. Brandon Trost up in second right now. Hamilton and Carboeasy in third. It's stretched out, JP. We're not seeing them follow as closely as they were doing slightly earlier.
Yeah, much more spread apart, and that's because the track temperature is at its near peak here, I think, for the race. 128 Fahrenheit, 53 Celsius. This is where it's going to start dropping around that 3 p.m. mark, what we normally see in the sim for these types of races. But by that point, you're towards the very end. By that point, your bet's made. And this is now where real driver skill is why we're seeing some of these gaps starting to really pick up here. It's not down to just draft is going to save you. Now it's, can you save tire?
And Firestone tires that you do have an unlimited amount of, so it's not like in the real world where you have an allocation given to you actually at the start of the month, really, and you're trying to then, you know, ration them effectively out over the course of practices so you can get to grips with the car, then actually through qualifying, and then, of course, get to the race itself. Can you imagine if we started giving tire limits, JP, for the qualifying week? Because, you know, in the real world, you're somewhat limited, right? A, by the physics, things like the engine, you want to run it as cool as possible, which means you only get a couple of chances to really do that. Also the driver, it's a stressful experience and a physically taxing one as well, so you don't often see drivers doing, you know, 5, 6, 7 runs a day. Here in the virtual world, you get unlimited runs from Monday evening through to Friday evening, and then you've also got to do all the practice runs to try and dial the setup in as well.
I think if you put tire sets on it, I think people are going to absolutely have some panic. But better yet, it really intensifies the feeling like you have for the Real World Indy 500, you would say.
I like it. Let's do it. Open Wheels 500, of course, up later this year on RaceSpotTV, where drivers get 3 attempts to qualify, and every time you go back out there, you take your previous time off the board. On board with Lucas Prada. Oh, into the wall. Bit of contact. That was running behind Jaden Munoz, and now you can see the frustration on the face. I think that's a damaged race car.
It almost looked like nearly running into the back end of Munoz on top of it as well. There was a little jump there. No meatball flight, but you can definitely tell he's not liking the feel already coming to pit road.
Here's another look at it, JP, off of turn 2.
And right here is where he tries to get the cut, and the car just jumps. Almost like there was a bit of air from the back, but more so, I think he was just about to hit the wall regardless.
And into pit lane. I think that is indeed a car that's now suffering a little bit. You get sidebar damage on this car. Effectively, business over. Back over to Gustavo Ariel with Casey Kerwin directly behind. Kerwin has gained 6 positions so far today. Looks up high to try and get past the Team Redline driver.
Yeah, now he's got to make the stride. Some of the attrition's really building up, especially for the RE NASCAR drivers. Gotta go. Press the Kachu button. Find a way to work with Lightning McQueen. Try and cut your way to the pack. Already up 7. He had been struggling to get up from about 16th for the longest time. Now that it's near money time, or rather victory time is the better phrasing for today, you've got to start pushing the tempo. Now that there's someone out of the pit road, that's going to help him gain some speed to get to the next pack 2 with Espes.
I believe that's Lucas Prado, who did come in for a 13.6 second pit stop, so indicates a front wing change at the very least. Jason Brophy also down to the box, so another driver making their way into pit lane as Michael Romanidis in from your race lead. Pit for what will be the penultimate time today if he can save a little bit of fuel. 70 laps to the end, that's 2 35 lap stints. He only got 33 that last stint by.
Yeah, I know there's some of those big drivers watching along too in sim. They did mention if he can get within the lap, he could potentially shake it up. Brandon Trost has still been able to hold on to the net lead for those on the better strat though. And all of this, he has been near knockout perfect. It's been a while since he's been on the iRacing headlines. Back since 2017, the last time his name popped up from the league scene in a major way for race victory contention. He's been a contender for this car for near a decade. Can he finally get something done here?
Riding with Peter Berryman. Sitting in third, his teammate Luke McEwen for the Apex Racing team directly behind. While they're, again, relative rookies maybe to the Indy 500 and its iRacing editions, plenty of experience across the sim racing world and making good use of it right now. The separation, Casey Kerwin's trying to close, 1.7 seconds. If we go green from here, that could be crucial. Dylan Alt's a little bit slow. I wonder if he's hit the wall as well in that Nexus Esport machine, or is he another one thinking it's time to come down to pit lane?
That's the huge question. And already we're starting to see a fair amount of swerving, I will say. Is it the right time for some of the swerving? We've seen that lose some time for some of these drivers so far, looking to be much better for the others. Here's a look, though, another replay yet again. This turn continues to nearly eat the right sides of race cars. That was so close.
You saw how slow he was off of the corner. Almost brushes up to the wall on the exit of turn 2 as well. And there comes the speed as Vasilius Belitsiotis would make the move happen. Now, Belitsiotis has been around the sim racing world, was racing in the Digital Nürburgring Endurance Series, fighting at the very front of that with the likes of Max Verstappen and Rudy Van Buren, Kevin Ellis Jr. and so many others. He's here in the Indy 500 as well. Aaron Vasquez brings the Drago Racing machine down to pit lane, follows his teammate Jose Soria. Pit stops beginning to pick up once again, although remember, the longer you go, the less fuel saving from now you have to do.
And technically, in theory, there's a chance you'd have to take less fuel. That time is fuel after all, right? We've seen it in the league scene, especially if you have, say, a 1 or 2 stop race. Drivers aim for the 8-second mark compared to, say, a 10-second full tank. Race leader is in. Once again, Brandon Trout's on schedule.
Seems as though only one other driver follows. That was the Spire Motorsports machine. Casey Kerwin brings the number 1 down. If you're wondering about the numbers, by the way, believe it is numbered on iRating, so don't look too much into that, but it's just quite cool to have Casey Kerwin, defending race winner, with the number 1 on his car as well. Traditionally, of course, see him maybe a bit more with the number 95. It's left a big margin, though, between Pablo Espez and Gustavo Ariel. It's grown to almost 3.5, 4 odd seconds, and it means that now, as they get ready to peel off to the lane once more, could we be down to maybe 10 cars in contention? There was definitely one driver peeling off to the lane, and a big lockup from Rodrigo Franzoni. Gets it slowed down just in the nick of time.
Yeah, very lucky that didn't dart hard left towards that pit lane with just about all 4 tires smoking up there on the pit lane. But still, time is positioning on track. He's trying to get all the positioning at one go.
So Brandon Trost has come out of pit lane, about 2.5 seconds back from Michael Romanidis. That is important because he's left himself with no drafting help at the line. A lap time, a 106.816, not representative, of course, because he's just rolled himself out, and that will now be his first timed attempt. We'll get a sense, though, where Peter Berryman is in comparison, because here comes the number 20 down to the box.
And Berryman's also been very solid on some of his strategy timings. Again, pitting on his own. Again, more efficient. Again, angles it to be able to get straight to the pit stall, straight to the jacks, back out quickly without having to go any diddle-daddling, especially when it comes to dropping that clutch. Once again, right to 9.4 seconds. Once again, one of the best in this race when it comes to the drop of the clutch.
And off and away already with Romanidis flying on past. Where's Brandon Trost? There's the purple machine popping into our shot as Berryman makes sure to give him plenty of room as he sweeps his way back up to speed now. He's got to get into the draft, got to make sure he doesn't lose too much time. Let's check back in on pit lane because while Phil Kraus, Rob Malechka, and then a handful of others continue to extend the run, it's busy, busy, busy. Akabuizi, McEwen, Pinheiro, Biko, Ariel, Lichtenberg, Van den Ness, and Pablo Espez all down in the lane. Akabuizi disappears for a second, but don't worry, he'll drop and he'll roll after a very, very tidy pit stop. Leads McEwen, but already there goes Michael Romanidis pass. Next up going to be Brandon Trost. And this is where the cycle, JP, the longer we go into this race, the more margin the quote-unquote leaders will end up having.
Yeah, this is going to be where the true skill really comes in terms of driver play. Once again, Berryman better with the undercut, with the speed as a result of the slingshot. But right now, It's still going to be where I'm keeping an eye on that 7, even with the cycle, because despite all we talked about him doing the caution dance, he's kind of made it to where the caution dance is almost mute if he stays behind Ferguson and Winquist and uses them as a fuel play.
So interesting. On the edge of your seats, just waiting to find out. Do we get a second caution on the day? That was a Carboeasy very close to the outside wall. Where does Phil Kraus feed out? Private label team hype machine directly behind a Carboeasy. First and second in qualifying, both still with a chance of coming out on top as Rob Malechka, winner yesterday in the 14th running of the iRacing Indy 500, makes his way to the lane alongside of Jaden Munoz, and he'll be hoping to try and feed out just alongside of Philip Kraus.
I don't think it's a surprise to see him stretch it this far because he's done so in the past with this chassis. Just had a long pit stop, though, at 10.3 seconds compared to the others. He's not going to be in that main pack. That's especially separated up by 2 to 3, near 4 seconds, possibly. Time things go. Looking like it's more so the 2.5 to 3 second variety that's going to put him right in front of Franzoni.
And that's dangerous because now not only is he going to be fighting with those behind, he's got a margin to try and close. 3 wide, Pinheiro and Franzoni, BK Racing duo, slide past Malechka. We've got 60 laps to go at the Yard of Bricks. JP, if you needed any reminding, business starting to pick up.
Yeah, pretty clear that the give and take is almost out in the meter and the fuel reserves at this point in terms of that. Now you got 2 teammates at least trying to go back and forth for the slingshot. Espez, he's been staying around net positioning about here, but you know who's gained the net time yet again? Casey Kerwin has picked up that time compared to Espez from the pit cycle by at least a second or two. But remember, they were separated by 2 seconds before the cycle.
It's where you'd expect Casey to be strong as well, let's be honest, given that, you know, eNASCAR, those machines, no pit limiter. You've got to get to grips with executing on the lane pretty quickly. Here are the main contenders you'd have to argue. A Carboeasy pokes himself out of line to make the pass on Peter Berryman. It is Brandon Trost that has the point here. Daniel Ferguson, Lucas Lindqvist, and then Michael Romanidis up the road and on the contra strategy. JP, we're going to reach 50 to go, and I think at that point, all bets are off in this grouping. These drivers will have to start fighting in and amongst themselves.
If anything, they're already thinking about it. A Carboeasy had to do so to get by Berryman. That's where he's preferred to be in front of. He does not want to sit behind the ART machines today. But now, does he sit behind Trout? Does he just use him as a fuel save device again? They've lost a second to Romanides, Ferguson, and Winquist. Here's the cut once again at the front of the pack.
And maybe importantly as well, Adriano Pinheiro is joining them as well. Almost 3 wide down into the opening corner down at the southwest point of the track. They'll get through safely, but very, very nervy right now. Everyone on the edge of their seats behind the wheel. Respective engineers, spotters, and crew members supporting and nervously waiting to find out where they'll be. About 40 minutes if we stay green. I think there's plenty of ifs around that statement, especially knowing it's not just this first pack, JP. That second pack, with Dylan Alt leading it, could be the ones that see the chaos really start to begin.
Especially with those saying, I've got to go, I don't want to be in this pack much longer here. I think Dylan's been fairly well composed despite everything here today, despite some of the struggles to get the track position. He's just been running his own tempo, and it's worked out perfectly for him. It's going to be a busy day, to say the very least, for him by today. I think we'll touch upon that later, but I can say this, for someone with barely any experience and who basically spent yesterday and Friday night to practice just to not be out of his depth for today, he's looked in his depth.
Like you say, busy day for him, a lot like some of these other drivers who are doing, you know, marathon Indy 500 appearances, whatever you want to call it. Dylan Alt amongst a handful of drivers trying to do, what is it, a total of 1,100 kilometers? I forget the exact math, but they're racing here 500 miles, and then they go off FTF Cup Series. A long day for them, JP.
Yes, that series co-owned in part by Justin Malone these days, but they're one of 3 drivers. You talked about the NASCAR drivers doing Alt is amongst those in that grouping. You also throw Nate Stewart in that grouping for certain. Those drivers currently amongst those in a couple hours after this race is done have to go and run 600 miles 1,000 kilometers in support of charity for the troops for that race today. So that's quite straightforward to both of those drivers. Their thoughts and mentality for that race today. For its different mentalities. For all, it's get more experience for the Coke Series, since he's amongst those with the least experience in the Coke Series this season. For Nate Storr, who we've seen already DNF earlier, it was just about making sure to manage the body itself. We talk about those doing the double or the triple or the quadruple or the every single mile of this car this weekend. Talk about going for 2 different car classes at full distance.
Long way to go, but if you get to the end, that's just one of the 2 races done and dusted in that Nexus Esport machine. Brandon Trost now behind Hamilton at Carboeasy, saving some fuel potentially, just trying to eke out whatever they can at the end of this race, as short a pit stop as possible. 54 laps to go. These drivers probably due down to pit lane in around 20 laps time. That will leave them at the earliest. Brandon Trost probably the one to come in first with 34 laps to go. That is asking for a little bit, especially if everyone else wants to be feisty out on track.
Yeah, they're going a little too feisty. How about side by side of this pack? They are just continuing to help Romanidis' case a little bit on track position. But if this ends up being for the race win itself, McEwen trying to lead for the first time net on in this pack. How about Pinheiro for the first time way up there? Others trying to say, let's back out of this.
Remember lap times, they're doing 42.6s in this pack right now. The fuel saving, we're about 2 seconds off of what they can do at their fastest. Right foot's at the being pulled back as much as possible, maybe in those fuel maps as well. This is about, again, trying to get it down to 31 laps to go. That would be the magic number where everyone would be comfortable. Big puff of smoke, but don't worry too much about that. Michael Romanidis, what's going through his mind right now? He's 8 laps better on fuel than those behind. I think he wants the caution right now.
I think we've said that every time at 18 laps into the stint, this would be a perfect time. With everything starting to kick off in the dirt pack, we're not even a quarter way to go in this race. And they're racing like it's the final 10 laps here to try and get around Brandon Trost and establish themselves before the final stint. Noticing some of the drivers like Malechka and Thorne saying, I'm backing out of this at the tail end of the group. Others like Pinheiro saying, I'm here for the first time. It's time to party.
And again, remember, they're saving fuel right now. They have picked up the speed slightly to 42 flat. We'll see what it is at the yard of bricks once more. Pinheiro pops out of line, pulls alongside of Phil Kraus. Carboeasy sits behind as now Luke McEwen takes the point, and that was a big slice. Big move to the inside. Oh, Brandon Trost, Carboeasy, and Phil Kraus all in very similar purple machines. But hold on to that. It was a 42 flat once again at the line, 7/10 slower than Michael Romanidis.
Yeah, I think right now they're definitely going to be comfortable on fuel. Romanidis right now, with the more he works on his own just about in front of Baroffi, the more that math gets worse and worse to be able to stretch it 35 apiece. Still, Casey Kerwin following along with him. He seems comfortable in the fuel save train here. He's one of the more least aggressive in this pack right now.
He's one of the drivers that's got to save the most fuel, though, alongside Brandon Trost, who's been out there for 16 laps so far. Driver's best position, probably Phil Kraus, 12 laps into the run. Malechka, 11 laps into the run. Again, all predicated on a caution not coming out. And I can say that because, JP, we've had a couple of incidents, plenty of retirements, 4 drivers DNF so far, but only the one caution. Caution's not a guarantee if there is an incident out on track.
Exactly. It can get argy-bargy. It can be where you scrape the wall, but all it matters is, do you have a car 45 degrees or more on the racing surface? Keyword on the racing surface. Pinheiro just about nearly caused an accident on it. He just about squeezed past a Carboeasy, had to lift hard off the gas.
Big checkup, doesn't really slow the pack up. Does mean Dylan Nault and company might just have been able to join the party. Look at the margin, down to maybe a handful of car lengths, 10 at most to the Nexus Esport driver, with Gustavo Ariel, Vasilius Belliziotis, and the rest in company as well. Adriano Pinheiro's recognized the situation though. He does not want to let those behind close, to lose out on track position. He passes Phil Kraus. Akabuizi will try and follow, but to the inside goes the Brazilian and going to the lead of the pack.
How about 3 wide with 48 laps to go to wake you up a bit for some? Pinheiro really stating his case for why he should contend for the win. We've seen him interested.
Oh! And in the air, Pablo Espes gets mixed up with Rodrigo Franzoni. We were wondering when the caution would fly. It's right in front of our eyes.
You had to wonder when, and in that case, Franzoni didn't want to lift. Espes didn't back out, and Espes gets sent to the moon like a fighter jet.
Not very happy, you can tell. Lucas Prada got out of that one by getting into the grass, hoping there's no damage to his car. But there's the moment that we were all waiting for, on the edge of our seats. Car airborne, never what you want to see, or at least the crash virtual. Let's take a look at what happened though, JP, off of turn 2.
Yeah, watch this. Espes has the fender, has it to the right rear. No backup from Franzoni, better yet, none from Espes, not enough time to. And he ends up going over top them. He goes for a wild ride.
Bounce, bounce. Bounce onto all fours? No. Physics don't want to play nice with us there. A couple more looks at it. I think probably a good perspective might be Lucas Prada's on board. As mentioned, had to take some decent avoiding action and watch up the track. This is what drivers need to be doing. You're always trying to get a sense for what's happening around you. You see the check up the drivers, the pile of smoke, go down as low as you can. You see the car going end over end. You go into the grass, you stay out of trouble.
Yeah, no choice. You have no idea where the bouncing ball, or in this case, the bouncing car may lie, but now it gets really interesting. No pit stop from the 7th.
Michael Romanidis stays out. Akabuizi follows. So does Aaron Vasquez, but the rest of the drivers down onto pit lane.
Yeah, now this is to where obviously it's the difference between a late stage pit stop now for these drivers in and those looking to top off in the final stages. Absolutely what Michael needed to get for that ladder strat to try and go in the early stop. Is that going to work though?
Luke McEwen, great run, but Phil Kraus I think might just have beaten him off of the lane. Pinheiro, Kerwin, Trost, Berryman, Ariel. Very, very tight margins. And now we've got a race on our hands. This brings the WSR Esports duo still into play, albeit maybe a little bit more pegged back than they would want to be. So Romanidis can pit in about 10 laps time, and I don't think he'll be good to the end. I'm not sure why he's made this call.
I think, honestly, if you make this call, it's because look at the others who made it outside of Akabuizi. You have a lot of people who've been running towards the back. Now they absolutely can make it with about 33 laps to go for the pit stop. It's going to be a full fuel load. They'll lose some time compared to those on the top off for when they come in. Yes, potentially, but it puts them in position where they come in and pit, get their scheduled service done and dusted in the window, and they don't pit the rest of the way. Then everybody else, depending on if there's a caution or depending on how things play out, they cycle back up, have track position. It's kind of a catch-22. It kind of can work. It just needs to come down to two things. Will there be a caution for part of it? If there isn't, do you have enough pace to make up for the time differential for those who will be on essentially near splash and dash at the end?
I think the risk as well here is how many more cautions realistically are we going to get? We were kind of touching on it, right? There's no way realistically we're going to get up to the 8 cautions that we had back in 2020. This is our second of the day so far. They take about 4 laps to cycle and sequence on out. Maybe we've got 2, maybe 3 cautions left in our cycle in my mind. Maybe Michael Romanidis is thinking, I don't have to have that much fuel in reserve anyway, and I'll come back in slightly later on when tires are going to be important. From 10th position, Luke McEwen. He's going to have to charge his way through the field, though. Jason Brophy is back on the lead lap now as well. 27 drivers find themselves still with a chance of victory.
Absolutely got the luck of the draw with the time at the caution flag now, but I asked quite simply to a couple of the drivers that are, you could call experts. We mentioned Michele Constantini. He's been basically helping a Cabo Easy, not in the spotter stand, but in general. He said, I have no clue how this is going to play out. Others for the ART camp, I have no idea how this is going to work out. In other words, a lot of the top drivers are as intrigued as we are. How is this going to play out for those that are about to run it dry compared to those who are hoping to run it dry then top off?
Just saying, Michele, you should have been here racing. We've got Hamilton, Brendan, Phil, Peter Berryman, Luke McEwen, Rob Malechka, and a handful of others doing the double, Jason Brophy included. You could have been here as well. Not going to be the final time the pace car peels off and away, but with 44 laps left to rumble, Michael Romanidis, Hamilton and Cabo Easy lead the train of drivers yet to come down pit lane, back out onto track with the green flag in hand. Remember, McEwen back in 10th with the fresh tires. How aggressive will he be? How aggressive will the rest of the drivers around look to be as well? There's Casey Kerwin alongside of Adriano Pinheiro.
Already big time at the front, already 3 wide in the heart of the field. Kerwin force middle.
All of this fighting up and down doesn't really matter where it is. The only fighting that matters will be at the front. A remarkable stat. Christian Steele, heading into the 2022 iRacing Indy 500, had raced in 5 other races at the feature level, only led 1 lap, and that was the one that took him to victory. Caution is out, and Gustavo Ariel very slow down the back of the pack.
3 wide, and it involved Brandon Truss getting absolutely shoveled out of the way. 3 wide with contact. It looked like when Malechka to the third and Ariel got the worst of it.
We knew that cautions would breed cautions. That car doing the crab walk and the crab rave down pit lane. Let's walk through this entire opening lap from Ariel's perspective. First out through the opening couple of corners. Just look how much they're on top of one another. We saw Casey Kerwin try and make the move on Pinheiro. Berryman would build up the momentum and the speed. And then Trost on the outside. I think that's Malechka in the middle. Ariel down low.
Yeah, watch Malechka to the third. Apparently Trost said, I had no idea where 3 wide. It was offset 3. You can see partly wide, too high up. Trost was committed to the high side. Ariel gets pin-ponned as Trost goes down the track. Hard contact in Ariel. Amongst those with significant damage as well. Picking up significant damage to 21 with a broken axle.
Right on board with his teammate, Gustavo Ariel's teammate Diogo Pinto, Portuguese driver, snakes his way through the chaos without too much drama. One more look on board, this time with Jaden Munoz slightly further up through the field in the Williams Esports machine. On the outside, plenty of dirty air, and you can see very, very lucky that he was not the one that got collected through all of that. Brandon Trost down to the box as well. With the third caution of the day, Jason Brophy also peels onto the lane, trying to top off.
Yeah, it still doesn't take him into the safe zone, but it does put him essentially near equal to everybody else, I think, in theory, with the time of the previous caution. Had to do something to get equal. Now, it gets even more intriguing up front here, because now everyone who stayed out here held firm on positions. Everybody who pit said, let's go 3 wide with 44 to go, I should say.
This is where, as well, I think it's helped Michael Romanidis most of all, this caution, because it now means that if he can bring this car, remember, we'll have at least 1 more lap after this under pace speed. If he can go another 6 laps or so, he's right on the edge of the window. He would probably still need 1 more caution to make it an easy fuel save. But if he wants to lead at the front, have track position, he might just have been given a golden opportunity. Left side of the screen as well. I know we still have that final pit stop sequence to go, but look where drivers have made their way up into the top 10 from, many of them starting from way down in the pack.
Remember, Clow in particular, he's been in the back all day, stayed out, and now he's in position. Chris Vandeness, we haven't mentioned that name, I think, since the starting grid, stays out, gets himself in the conversation. Jose Soria's the big one who kind of had to, with all the different wing issues for the 17 today, to stay out, try and hope for something to go different compared to the heart of the field. A lot of different names. Oh, and by the way, Brendan Lichtenberg just deciding to do things different yet again. Not a surprise from him.
Remember, third yesterday for Brendan Lichtenberg in the 14th running of the iRacing Indy 500. In his 10th appearance in that 14-year history as well. What a remarkable stat. Jason Brophy back down to the box. So again, doing everything he can to pack as much fuel into the car. Diogo Pinto in as well behind. Unlimited tire set. So Brophy could go up on the jacks and get some Firestone. He slid through the box again.
You would think he would learn, but he's still got the fuel.
Hashtag blame Jason Brophy. I mean, he does know about pit issues, so I guess that's totally fine. And we'll get ready to go with the lights off on the pace car. So 40 to go at the restart. Remember, 35 is kind of the magic number where we think it's not an easy fuel save, but it's more comfortable than the 37 that Alessandro Bico did in the first stint of the race. We've only had a handful of cautions so far. Is this going to devolve into a stop and start end to the race? Will it be the second iRacing Fixed 500 in 4 years to end under the caution? In 14 years of the iRacing Indy 500, its open counterpart, we have never once in the feature broadcast race seen the caution end the race. Pace car off and away. Your pole sitter, the fastest man across 16 corners and 4 laps here at the racing capital of the world, will pick up the throttle. He's got Michael Romanidis directly behind him. They check themselves up. Green flag flies, racing once more.
Nice clean restart, looks like for here. Not as hectic quite yet. Give it a couple moments, because right now these drivers are a little bit more spaced out, a little bit more to work.
And so as they build the speed onto the back straightaway, watch for Luke McEwen, the first of the drivers with the fresh Firestone tires. He'll slide his way potentially behind of Lucas Lindqvist, but it's Michael Romanidis to the inside and trying to go to the race lead. Remember, he probably still needs to save a little bit of fuel.
Yeah, still needs to come in with the next 10 laps or so. So right now, this is all just for battling for the track position itself on circuit. Cabo Easy can go a little bit further, a little bit more easier, so to speak, in regards to that. But everybody else, amongst those who are good to go, that is McEwen, who is net point on that strategy. Keep in mind, Phil Cross changing that as they go back and forth there in the back.
It's time to break out your picks, if you will. Do you think the drivers that have come down pit lane are more suitably placed in that regard? Do you think Luke McEwen may be slightly better positioned than someone like Jason Brophy and Diogo Pinto coming in to top off at the end of the caution cycle? Or do you think the Carboeasy, Romanidis, Lichtenberg up front, are they in control, track position, and in the driver's seat? Remember, Romanidis is now on to the 32nd lap of the stint. A Carboeasy, in contrast, 25 laps in. He's good on fuel. There's no question about him. It's really just the Coanda Esports driver that's left in that tricky situation. And you look at the conditions, JP, it's starting to cool off.
Right on schedule, just around that 3 o'clock-ish or so at this point in session. For the prediction side, I think it's going to be right now in a position for Phil Kraus to be able to win this if it stays green, because he's been one of the best today in the traffic. A lot of others are having hard times being able to work through it, even with the track temperatures cooling down here. Better get a move done here already. Soria, he's been shuffled a fair bit by some of those looking to move ahead on the pounce.
He's been robbed of a close finish here at the Speedway before, has Jose Soria. Finished back in 2021, second behind Phil Kraus in the sole race that's finished under the caution. Now newly lined up with Drago Racing. What can he do? With some resources behind him as well. Aaron Vasquez, his Drago Racing teammate, up in the mix as well on two very, very similar strategies. And we've talked about wanting strength in numbers maybe towards the very end of the race. 36 to go. Hypothetically, you could get to the end from here. We saw Alessandro Bico go the 37 laps on fuel. Michael Romanidis, though, how much longer can he extend the tank he's got in that car?
I think right now at this point it's within the next 5 laps. Quite simply, you can't really extend it much further. We've had 2 cautions before 5 total pace laps on the fuel numbers, or rather the mapping for pacing essentially. That helps save a fair bit. Lichtenberg is going to be an interesting case here because he's the same as a Carboeasy, and this puts him directly from him battling essentially in pack 3 all race to being in the conversation because of him having to make a bold move. He had to make it if he wanted a shot. Others, they're getting really close to scraping the wall. A couple just scraped it there.
Rob Malechka and Phil Kraus, the two drivers that were maybe best positioned on the fuel save, now having to fight their way elbows out through the field. Kraus behind McEwen, Malechka now in front of Pinheiro, but on the outside of the top 10 and looking in, wanting to try and work their way forward. This time by Michael Romanidis. He's gone 35 laps so far, would have 34 to go. Is he going to peel off to the left-hand side? Coanda Esports driver stays on track. He's done a masterful job of bringing himself back into touching distance with the rest of the drivers and leaving himself in contention. We say it so often, JP, the Speedway will pick its winner. Just leave yourself a fighting chance.
You have to be able to do not only conquer the drivers, but the track itself. And for many drivers today, the track has spit out arrow push in through 1 and 2 into the wall. The best of those today have been able to manage that arrow push, but better yet, been able to try and navigate the traffic, been able to navigate the tire burn, been able to navigate themselves in position to pounce. Drivers like Kerwin have done a good job to be able to put themselves at least in the ball game. It's going to be interesting where those 7 in front now cycle, because just about all of them, I think, are in the window where they'll have to pit now, with us in the safe window just about for fuel.
It's very much go time behind Kerwin. Dylan Alt, Jaden Munoz squabbling in and amongst one another. But your defending race winner buried in the heart of the pack and has some work to do if they want to try and be there at the very end, and to celebrate by kissing the virtual bricks and by drinking the virtual milk as well. A couple of different choices, of course, of milk. A chocolate maybe, a controversial choice rather. Here comes Michael Romanidis though. 32 laps he'll have to go on the fuel. He's done exactly what he needed to.
Well done in terms of the entry once again. He did the job he needed to, got the cautions he absolutely needed to be able to get near identical on cycle. Kabawisi can go an extra couple laps here compared to those as well. Same for Lichtenberg. It's the next who's in line would be the 12 that has to come in. Already 35 laps through the cycle. No signal yet from Aaron.
He's been sat there and maybe riding on the fuel maps. Remember, you have full advantage of 8 different maps to use behind the wheel of the car. Will he peel off to the left? No, Drago Racing Zone stays out there in third, but behind, that's Jose Soria, his teammate, that does decide to blink and come in for the final time. Michael Romanidis exits the lane. He's got plenty of clean air around him now. 31 laps to go. One danger. If you're going full attack, your fuel tank can only go 29 laps. He's still got to conquer up 2 magic laps of fuel to the checkered flag.
Yeah, this is going to be the nerve-wracking part, and what I was talking about. This is where I think for Kabawisi and Lichtenberg, it's a little bit more on the safer side. Get the 29, 30 laps to go. They have that extra fuel in hand in the first place. Be able to try and do something, why Aaron's trying to stretch it, and I think has stretched it. Everybody else, I think, though, that's the major thing, Arjuna. You're talking about the pit stops for these drivers coming in with less than about 15 laps to go. They don't really need a full fuel tank to make it all the way in theory, right?
It'll be interesting to see if they then elect to not take full Firestone tires as well. That could be an option for them. Jose Soria is out 2.3 seconds behind from Michael Romanidis, and so not going to see them swapping back and forth just yet at the front of the field. It's now Team i5G in control, though. They've won so many times before. 4 straight iRacing Indy 500 wins before this year Powerslide Motorsports took the crown from them. It's a pit party. 29 to go at the line. Lichtenberg follows a Kabawisi and Vasquez will roll into line behind. But it's Chris Van Den Ness that leads for the very first time today in the Megiaz machine, the number 32.
Welcome to the party, Chris Van Den Ness, you can always say here. It's been at the back most of the way, started midfield near identically, and now is in prime position at least to be able to try and battle for a top 10 here. He's going to be very happy. Downside, Daniel Ferguson just took his lead point away.
Remember, they'll swap back and forth hopefully and be effective in it. Kabawisi and Lichtenberg racing off of pit lane. Now, where's Romanidis? Where's Jose Soria? Those are the questions to answer. Romanides builds his speed up behind. i5G Machine's going to be in front, though, as they drag race out of turn 2, back to the north side of the track. And i5G, Akabuizi, and Lichtenberg net lead of the race.
Well, it's going to get interesting now from here, right? Akabuizi and Lichtenberg ended up going about a second quicker than what Romanides and Aaron Fazekas was able to do in their pit cycles. Kerwin, by the way, he came into that same group. He, I think, may have just only took a 6-second pit stop there, Arjuna.
Curious what that's going to mean for him. He's been dropped into the heart of the fight. Rob Malechka still sideways as he stays out on track, and they are going as long as they can. Chris Van der Nest, the next to blink, to peel off down to the lane and back over to the leading cars on the strategy at least. Akabuizi, Lichtenberg, Romanides, Vasquez, and then 1 second back to Casey Kerwin, who has got some work to do to close that drafting range, but he's there or thereabouts.
Now curious where he lines up on the time now, especially with him having much shorter pit stop cycle time there, trying to double check on how much he was able to put in, whether it's on the jack or not. Appears to have gone no tires, can confirm with the one car. So how will the rubber hold up? 40.8. That's one of his quickest. That's 2/10 off what they put in practice on much cooler race conditions.
Question's going to be at the end. How are those tires holding on as back out onto track slide a couple of those Nexus Esports drivers? Dylan Alt, who is now 1 lap down, sped on entry. Unfortunately for him, his day and his fight comes to an end. And I think that's his chance of doing all 500 miles potentially in the books as well. Phil Krause up the inside of Luke McEwen, fighting down to turn 3. These drivers still yet to pit. WSR Esports butt kicker teammates out front, 27 laps into the run. They'll be next to make their way down to pit lane. McEwen, Krause, Malechka, Berryman, Munoz, Belitsiotis, Prada, and Jasir. They are 20 laps into the run, JP. They've still got, like you said, maybe 10 more laps before they have to come in for fuel.
And at that point, it becomes, does anyone try the Casey Kerwin again? Or better yet, does it come down to just the 7-second pit stop for the fuel and be able to close things out here? We know some of the drivers like Krause have to be thinking about that set call. That's a strategy specialty from private label Team Hype on the league side. But all that's well, pit stops still a couple laps out for Ferguson and Lindquist, even with all the off-cycleness for them, even being in the back, taking that risk from the first caution earlier today to get to this position. They're still in probably very solid position for at minimum a top 5 as teammates. They're going to be happy about that as a team.
Still have a lapped car in between them as well. So just helping them out to hit their numbers. There goes Rob Malechka up high, working on Phil Krause. He'll get the run, he'll get the slingshot. Just watch this down into turn 3. Pops out of line, but now with no helping hand, Krause gives him the momentum, gives him the opportunity to slide into line. Two experienced veterans working together there to make sure they close back up to Luke McEwen. I'm getting nervous right now, JP, mainly because if a caution flew right now, it would change the race. And yes, I am willing to curse that into existence.
Better yet, it would throw it into full chaotic flux, to say the very least. We mentioned already those watching on for several teams saying, I'm not sure what's going to happen earlier on. And that was a couple cautions ago. Now at this point, who knows? All it takes is one caution, and Jason Brophy can be in the conversation. His spotter, Connor Harrington, I think, is just hoping that anything happens to bring them in. Alexander Biko, meanwhile, he's been running in place right now with the Williams machine. He looks a bit more woken up from the first 30 laps today.
Yeah, you can tell there's no cooling down right now. He's got to get the pedal to the metal and go, 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 go. 22 to go at the line for the leader as the Williams Esports driver fends out of the final corner. Now, remember, Pinto, Biko, and Brophy all topped off on that last caution cycle. I don't think there's a chance of them getting to the end. Question will be, could they do a Casey Kerwin, take no tires, and maybe shorten that pit stop that little bit more? Now, Malechka already past Krause, back down to the north end of the track, to the inside of Luke McEwen, but he's going to get pinched on speed, won't get past, has to set it up once more.
And McEwen's not going to back off on that at this point. No way whatsoever. We've seen him be fairly defensive when he's been in this prime position, being the net leader for a grouping today. Malechka the third, though, we talked about him trying to fuel out the car, try and get used to the handling compared to his open setup. This is the time he mentioned he expected to be ready to try to attack. He just put himself on the wall.
And that was a hard lick as well, I'm pretty sure. Any chance of getting the move done before the pit stop cycle done and dusted. Hoping now he's not going to get held for a little bit longer to repair some damage potentially. It's very, very possible. You can tell how much he was trying. Balance of the car, as JP mentioned, going to be very, very slightly different to how that open car handled. Here's another look at the replay.
Yeah, just took it straight to the side pod in the right front tire. That's going to be a major question now on the speed the rest of the time. He's lost a lot of ground from that. And yet again, all he did was try and take that second line. Did it a little bit late, a little bit too late to do so. Couldn't get the cut.
So Belitsiotis, Jasir, and Munoz, the Williams Esports trio, all make their way down pit lane. Beckham, Jasir, the one at the back of the pack with the yellow highlights for the Williams Esports Academy crew. It's Jaden Munoz that leads Belitsiotis away to identical paint schemes. Not difficult at all for the commentators to pick apart. They'll build up the speed. Remember, you've really got to hustle it here on pit exit. They'll fan out as wide as they can get. Already, though, Akabuizi flies past. Lichtenberg in tow as well. Team I5G still 1 and 2 in the net lead of the race.
Yeah, I was about to say, Akabuizi's in a prime position, depending on how this cycles, to be right in that conversation. Remember, 34 seconds, 33 seconds was around where the leaders usually cycle to. They look in a great spot for it. Brophy is in, it looks like, as he completes his service here for the final time under 20 to go.
So that's a clear indication you cannot get to the end if you're Diogo Pinto or Alessandro Bico. There comes Daniel Ferguson into the box. Lucas Lindqvist going to lead the lap at the yard of bricks. And so one by one, the dominoes are falling. We're getting closer to knowing where everyone will place themselves on the board. Luke McEwen still in front of Rob Malechka, Phil Kraus, and Peter Bergman. Are these the drivers that have been saving the fuel and aren't going to take tires in the final pit stop of the race?
That's the biggest question, I think, for everybody right now is, do you even risk going on the jacks? Obviously, the main play, too, is the option. Take a little bit less fuel, get it where as soon as you're off the jacks, boom, you're off and away. Remember, a couple extra seconds to fill it all the way to the top. The most you can get out of it is 7-8 seconds if you take the tires. No tires again. At 6 seconds seems to be the play. Kerwin, for reference, is still behind the Williams entries from that cycle.
So he's holding on to the positioning in terms of track positioning as Casey, although have been keeping an eye on his hands, and I can tell you, having to be fast hands, Pato Award style, to hold on to the balance of the car. Go back to the second grouping. Daniel Ferguson is slotted directly behind Brendan Lichtenberg, and now with an 11-lap advantage on the Firestone tires. Is this set up for WSR Buttkicker to take advantage, to leapfrog to the front? Lucas Lindqvist going to join them and leave pit lane this time by as team manager Ferguson flies past the Hyperstar.
Speaking of the Hyperstar, seeing him try to work from the high side on all this, all that's wow. We talked about Romanitas. He is still not out of this conversation yet. He's right in that pack he needs to be in if he wants to try and win this race. It's just about pit stop time in the next 3 laps, if that, for everybody else in this field. And despite all the math, despite all the struggles to get in the math calculation, it looks like these 4, maybe 5, might be your drivers to beat at this point, depending on where McEwen cycles and everyone else in terms of their timings.
Fly past turn 1 once again. There are the race leaders ready to make their way through that corner. They've got some lap traffic, as mentioned. Don't forget, interspersed into the groupings that they have. 33 saw the green flag. We're left with 24 out there on track. 21 still on the leading lap, with the pit stops left to cycle through at the very front of the field. Rob Malechka sits in second behind one of the Nexus Esports machines that, as mentioned, is 1 lap down. They are doing 41 zeros effectively. Compared to the drivers behind in that second grouping, it's a couple of hundreds here and there. The pace not shifting around too much more, as now within 14 laps to go, these drivers staying out as far as they can.
You know, since that wall contact, notice one thing, the past 5 laps, he's been up to near a 10th off of what McEwen's been able to put up. So right now, you can definitely tell, especially right about here, You can tell it's just a tick off on that straight line speed after that contact from earlier, and that was the concern. Was he going to be able to keep up with that scrape? Remember, with this car, it's very fragile, especially with that side pod.
So will he peel off and be held for a little bit longer on pit lane because of that damage? No. They go even longer, and they're starting now to argue a little bit more behind. Daniel Ferguson, Lucas Lingfist, the WSI Esports duo directly behind the i5G duo. They lost a 1/10 of a second to the leaders last time by, though, and an important number because a 10th here, a 10th there, it starts to add up, and it could be as much as 3 or 4 tenths if they continue to squabble like this. Remember, we think the maximum those leaders can go is about 35 laps, so maybe 2 more before they're down to the lane.
And that's if they choose to go at that point. McEwen, I think it's up to him on how he goes. It looks like he's going in. This is the money stop.
And they went 3 wide down to turn 1. Here comes the charge from Daniel Ferguson. Akabuizi's going to hold him off around the outside, at least initially, but it's building up. It's intensifying. We're hitting that part. JP, everyone who's been sitting behind and waiting has the gloves off, and it's fist flying with 11 to go at the line.
Akabuizi wants redemption from yesterday. He is right now in line to do so. He's not going to give this up easily. The boxing gloves for the high side. He looks for the cross on Ferguson. Keeping an eye, though, there's the shortstop as expected. McEwen, 8.4 on the jack.
I think he still took tires, though, did not want to risk it, and so where does he feed out? Remember, he is allowed to run a little bit out wide through the short shoot of 1 and 2, build up his speed that little bit more, try and get out in front, but already Akabuizi alongside of Daniel Ferguson gonna fly on plus. Blast on through as they charge down to turn 3. McEwen forced up to high, 3 wide they go. Ferguson around the outside, a new Garden-esque attempt. Akabuizi will try, still side by side with 10 to go.
Fairly amount of give and take from Ferguson coming in his 10 lap to go mark. Where does Berryman cycle? How about 3 wide for the lead?
Once again, we're going to keep doing this. The dance back and forth. Apex Racing slide on through, and Peter Berryman off and away, but a little bit too far behind for him, unfortunately. Berryman may be out of the mix, but McEwen now on top.
Now where does Malechka the third and Kraus go? They've been working together a bit, co-opetitioning for that front spot. Are they going to be in the position right now? How about that front group, though? You're talking about McEwen, who's been waiting patiently, started to pounce with 50 to go. Ferguson took a risk on strategy. The team boss for WSR about to turn things around for a victory. And Akabuizi in redemption mode in the prime positions to pounce.
Very good stop for Malechka. He'll beat Phil Kraus off and away from the lane. It's Ferguson on the inside of McEwen, but you can see those two that went that little bit longer, getting caught out much like Peter Berryman did. The overcut not working the way they would have wanted, and now, if the gloves weren't off before, they're thrown out the room. Biko leads with Pinto still yet to pit, but Ferguson, McEwen, and Akabuizi 1, 2, 3 in this leading group.
McEwen, though, trying high side. We've seen that work out fairly well today. Problem is, though, Ferguson's looking quicker from the inside at least. Still side by side, your overall leader still yet to pit.
There is the Williams Esports driver who is on to the 32nd lap of the stint. There is no way they can go 9 more laps, you have to think. They're going to give it the good old college try. Ferguson in front, his teammates cheering him on in chat, and a very unique situation for him in many ways. I can tell you, Biko and Pinto have just slid into the lane. We are going to find out where they put themselves. McEwen slices back to the lead.
A good, efficient move yet again to make the pass. Looks like still yet to get to the box. These drivers were only 25 seconds ahead of your current battle for the net lead. Now it's time to block off the draft, though. Ferguson again high side.
And short pit stops for the both of them. Biko 4 seconds, Pinto 5 seconds, no tires. Don't think that will give them the lead. Will let them, though, be part of the equation. So it comes down to this. The 8 laps left at the racing capital of the world. The greatest spectacle in sim racing. And with newcomers in the mix, the contenders from the favorites in the mix as well. Who's it gonna be? Can Rob Malechka write history and do the double? The iRacing Indy 500 yesterday and the iRacing Fixed 500 today.
He just charged up 3 spots in the span of 3 corners. Malechka the third, He's amongst those on the fresher tires. He's on pounce mode. He's faster than everyone else in front.
And as a snake at Indianapolis, we're not in the month of May anymore, but those same vibes reverberate around the speedway. Ferguson slices back. When do you make the move, JP? How late can you dare wait? Joseph Newgarden waited till turn 3 on the final lap.
That could be tricky here today. It might become a drag race like we seen last time out for the open side. I think it comes down quite simply. Make the move final lap, yes. Might come down to simply 1 and 2. That's where a lot of people thought O'Ward got it in the real-world Indianapolis 500-mile race. Will that be the case here today? Malechka the third seems to be waiting to try and think about the move properly.
Is he going to take it 3 wide to turn 1? He's got the speed. He's got the confidence. Don't do this, Rob. We're 3 wide for a moment. Ferguson gives him just enough room and 6 laps left to go. Polish power on top. Malechka gets set to try and do the double.
Can he play defense again, though? He had to do so before. Double toe built up the middle again. 3 wide to 3.
And Akabuizi and Kraus fighting behind. Does this leave these 3 to be in contention? Akabuizi passed by Phil Kraus, in fact. This is wild. Remember, JP, a handful of laps ago, we saw Malechka in the wall. We thought that was his chance done and dusted. He slithers back to the yard of bricks, though. We've got 5 more laps to go, and 2 by 2, we run at the front.
Remember, Kraus is on the same cycle as Malechka the third, and we know he likes to build houses in victory lanes, especially late. Can he bait Malechka the third? McEwen still trying to follow the snake. Malechka the third driving all over the racetrack.
Got to do it proactively. Cannot do this in reaction. All of these moves back and forth. McEwen on the outside, putting a lot of trust in the ability of Rob Malechka to hold on to that car. Phil Kraus has joined the party. Here we go. 3 wide they'll be at the yard of bricks. Not even at the line. 4 laps left to go in the iRacing Fixed 500.
Only have to do it for 4 more sets of quarters for each lap. Kraus right now wants quite simply just to wait for the diamond line. Malechka the third focused on McEwen. Kraus waiting for the moment.
This is insanity, and this is where the racecraft that we were talking about comes into play. Yes, there is technical skill to get the car around the 12 corners, 13 corners they've got ahead of them. But where do you place the car? When do you make your move? Phil Kraus has bided his time. Where does he go? To the yard of bricks once more. Malechka trying to cover down to the wall.
All Kraus can do is go outside and hope it sticks. He tries to clear both of them to 1 and 2.
Long way around, and Malechka being pinched. McEwen compromises and then crashes into Phil Kraus, who goes up into the wall. Still 3 to go. Green flag still in the air.
Good save by Kraus. He's not going to be happy, but McEwen trying to give the pinch. Does this open the door back up for Ferguson with the way they're racing?
I mean, the amount of pinching going on right now, it's mere pixels being left. We're not talking millimeters here. It's a unit of measurement infinitesimally smaller than that. 5 miles to settle it, though. So many drivers still in line. The choo-choo train goes back to 22nd position. McEwen around the outside, and Malechka going to try and wash up the track and hold on. Ferguson in the catbird seat.
Ferguson's trying to get a diamond line down. The problem is the air wash isn't letting him. He's losing lots of time. In fact, he's under attack now by Merriman.
Can it be 2 Apex machines at the front trying to work together? 2 WSR machines inside the top 5 as well. We've got some new contenders in the world of the IndyCar, but we've got 2.5 miles left to settle this. Out of turn 4, Daniel Ferguson in the wall, and the caution. We'll see Rob Malechka do the double. A winner yesterday in the iRacing Indy 500. A historic 14th running of the race, and he'll do it now in the 4th running of the iRacing Fixed 500. Rob Malechka, the king of Indianapolis.
How about that for Chef Burt? He's able to cook up the special in the double. An unbelievable moment. Where did he come from? With 5 laps to go, he and Kraus had the right strategy. It's him who holds off the crowd.
Wow. Our voices saved, fortunately, through all of that, because I think we were going to lose them. Let's go back in time, JP, and first watch. Well, I think what happened to Phil Kraus will start to tell us a little bit more of the tale. 3 wide out through turn 1. These drivers left it all out there for us.
He said it quite simple. Malechka III did. He was going to test the limits. That was part of the limits. Had to stay 3 wide for the win. That time, Kraus, at the time, got the testament of the limits. Again, more close contact. That time, Berryman. That time, right to the tire. That spins it around. But this is where it really kicks off here. You see, this is where Ferguson trying to hold things back. Berryman tries the diamond line. Right about there, Berryman took a higher arc.
Wow, incredible. Until yesterday, Powerslide Motorsports in 14 years had never come out on top here at the Speedway in the iRacing Indy 500. Rob Malechka does it not once, but twice. He won yesterday in the 14th running of the iRacing Indy 500. He wins today, the 4th different winner in 4 attempts in the iRacing Fixed 500. We've got a year ahead of us of some intense American open wheel racing. It all starts with the VCO IndyCar Challenge in a couple of weeks' time. It builds to the IndyCar Pro Butt Kicker Series later on this year. And just a reminder, if you didn't know what Indy means, now you know.
And again, he called a shot. He said he was going to play patient, get a feel of the car as the race went on today, and then test the limits in the end. Guess what? He tested those limits. He played those limits. He made those limits stick, and it now puts him into a pretty elusive group. How about that for a driver still sideways?
He's so happy that he's apparently done this entire race sideways and hasn't quite realized. Luke McEwen and Peter Berryman should not hang their heads in vain. A 2nd and 3rd place for them, especially knowing how yesterday's race went. They can be very, very proud of their efforts over the course of the week, and they'll be ones to watch without a shadow of a doubt over the rest of this summer. Lucas Lindqvist as well. Let's give a shout out to WSR Esports Butt Kicker. Yes, Daniel Ferguson's going to end up down in 23rd position. They were on for a double top 5 and had so many different cars in contention at one point or another. There's some changes coming in the world for Powerslide Motorsports, but this month of June has started off on top. Rob Malechka's going to burn it down in victory lane, and he's getting used to this feeling down there on the yard of bricks. Picture perfect donuts.
And again, it takes skill to do it once. It takes absolute skill and precision and luck and strategy to do it twice, let alone in 2 days. Let alone, mind you, he was in a different state last night after the last race. You talk about travel distances, you're talking about someone that is able to dominate in 1,000 combined miles in the end for checker flags.
And I can only imagine how drained he's feeling now. He was drained yesterday after we talked to him in victory lane. We'll get a chance to chat with him once again, and probably a good choice to show up at the end of the day as he's parked there on the yard of bricks. Again, Powerslide Motorsports on top. It's Apex Racing 2nd and 3rd with Rob Malechka, Luke McEwen, and Peter Berryman ready to spray the champagne. Only one ready to drink the milk. Lucas Lindqvist 4th in front of Phil Kraus with Hamilton Akabuizi and Brendan Lichtenberg, the I5G duo. Unfortunately not able to make their strategy work. 6th and 7th for them. Michael Romanidis down in 8th in that Commander Esports machine. Tried a different strategy, did not play out the way he maybe anticipated. But for Aaron Vasquez and Drago Racing, it's a top 10 for them in front of the trio of Williams Esports drivers. Jaden Munoz and then Alessandro Pico and Vasilius Belitsiotis, Casey Kerwin, Chris Van Den Ness, Brendan Clough, and then Beckham Jasir, Jose Soria, Jason Brophy, Diogo Pinto, and Lucas Prada make up the drivers finishing on the lead lap alongside of Adriano Pinheiro. Dylan Alt, first car 1 lap down after speeding on entry in the late stages of the race. Daniel Ferguson scored as 2 laps down after being tangled up in the late race incident with Zeke Willis 24th and 5 laps adrift. Then you get into the used car lot, no other way of saying it. Luke Peters, Brandon Trost, Gustavo Ariel, Rodrigo Franzoni, Pablo Espez, and Nate Stewart. And 3 more drivers not seeing the end. Sander Neinhoff, Dominic Lukomsky, and Jere Lehtinen. The 33 that saw the green flag. What a finish! And our race winner standing by, not taking him as long to find the broadcast booth this time around, but Rob Malechka does the double, and a historic double. Rob, a winner in the iRacing Indy 500 and now in the iRacing Fixed 500. How are you feeling? Tired, but I'm sure on top of the world as well.
Yeah, that one was a lot harder than open, right? I mean, it seemed everyone just kind of kept pushing. I mean, the setup was very difficult to drive. Everyone was sliding all over. But yeah, just kind of stuck to the fuel save plan. Figured, if we get one or two guys having bad pit stops, we're going to be in a really good situation just pulling up onto them. They had a few guys in that pack hit the wall and drop back. And I think myself, Luke, and Phil were just able to gain like 3 seconds on the field there, which ultimately got, myself P1 and credit to, Luke and Peter in second and third, and then worked out for Phil as well in P5. So, yeah, I honestly got a bit lucky there, but, I think this one is definitely way harder than the one yesterday. But, I think I'm also the first one to win both broadcast races in the weekend. So I'm very happy with that.
The crazy thing is, this is the only time, hopefully, we do Fixed and Open on the same weekend, right? So you'll also be the only driver to ever do it on the same weekend, and still very difficult for someone to try and win both Fixed and Open. I mentioned as well, Powerslide Motorsports until yesterday had never won an iRacing Indy 500. Now we've got two of them. I know Fixed is a little bit different in terms of, you're not working on the car and the setup as much. But talk to me a little bit about, all the support behind the scenes from the team at Powerslide over the month of May and building up to what's been a historic weekend.
Thank you for the bias on the broadcast. Appreciate it.
What bias?
What bias? Yeah, I mean, obviously, Adam and Hugo, they worked their butts off on that race setup. That was a complete rocket ship. Worked great with Adam. Excited to work with Augustin Canapino and a few other guys in the next coming months on the open side of things, and all the iRacing series that are starting up again. So, what can I say? We just cooked, right? I mean, it wasn't easy, but we got it done.
Are you going back to Chicago tonight and then driving back home tomorrow for another Indy 500?
There's not a race route, right? I mean,
we'll put one on for you to win it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm a bit hungover still. Not super tired, but I can definitely feel it mentally that I am not completely here, but that made the race even more difficult than it already was. But yeah.
Amazing. Can't wait to see how you get on later this year for the Open Wheels 500. Maybe that's the trick for the qualifying run. Before we let you go, Rob, any final thoughts before we let you go? Historic weekend, but as we also said, there's plenty of IndyCar racing coming up for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it yesterday, but, all this is thanks to iRacing and IndyCar, right? I mean, a few months ago, none of us thought this was going to be going on again. And then, it was like Christmas again when we got the news, and all of us just started sweating hours and hours of Indy every week. And I have to give credit to, all the other big teams like i5G, Team Talent, IAR, the core group. Everyone's really got along surprisingly this month of May. And, it's great to see the support between all the groups. And, looking forward to your series, or I don't know what you call it, to be honest, and the iRacing series. We're gonna have some extremely talented drivers hopping into IndyCar for the first time, and that's great to see. So big thanks to you, Arjuna, for putting on your league, and then also iRacing for that.
And by the way, next time you're on camera, can you make sure that you're the right way around and not sideways?
Maybe. I'll think about it.
Think
maybe
about it?
Okay. Yeah.
You'll grace us with the correct orientation. Congratulations, Rob. You can put Indy to the side for the time being. Drink another glass of milk. Yeah. Plenty of hours went into this double success, and go off and celebrate.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Arjuna. Take care.
Always great to be able to catch up to the drivers, and slightly recovering Rob Malechka from all the celebrations yesterday. Another batch of celebrations left to come. And JP, I think he said it best. It's so good to have this event back. A year away felt so painful for many of these drivers, and I can't now wait to do it next year when we return to the Speedway in 2025.
Yeah, this was an absolutely thrilling Fixed Indy 500, to say the very least, because you had so many different drivers at least join the conversation. Some of the strategy roulette, we especially seen that with the strategies with different drivers trying to stretch the fuel, strat. It came down quite simply to those on the fresher rubber in the end, and better yet, those who had the boldness and the skill set to make the moves that Malechka III did to win it.
And we've got such an exciting time of iRacing special events still left to come. We'll make our way from the Brickyard up to, well, upstate New York, the 6 Hours of the Glen. The third of our VCO Grand Slams lies ahead of us on June the 15th. Coverage here live on the iRacing Esports Network and on RaceSpotTV. Don't forget, top split winners in GTP and in GTD win invites to the 2024 IMSA Esports Global Championship. And oh yeah, we've got 2 new cars to join the fun, JP. We've got that Ford Mustang GTD alongside the Corvette GTD to join to the mix.
And it should be a fun time, to say the least, as part of that Grand Slam, especially with the balance. A lot of hype on the new cars, as you said. That's going to be, I think, one of the main driving points to see the American muscle come out to play at the Glen.
And it leads us into the month of July, where we mentioned the Martinsville MX500 maybe going to be one of the particular highlights for so many people. However, I think it's about time for us to wrap things up from the racing capital of the world. It was so good to be back home again in Indiana, but all good things must come to an end. It's Rob Malechka, a historic weekend for him and for Powerslide Motorsports. Winner of the 14th iRacing Indy 500 and winner as well of the 4th iRacing Indy Fixed 500. We'll be back to do all of this dance next year. So much excitement in the world, though, of IndyCar racing. Don't forget to stay tuned to the iRacing Esports Network for the Pro Series that is to come. For our team behind the scenes, my name's Arjuna Kankipati, alongside of Justin Prince, signing off from the best place in the world, from Speedway, Indiana, where we leave with a smile on our face and more great racing back in our lives.